Chapter 423. Oh, damn it. My young miss, don't add to the mess in this special situation. Before Master left, he should have warned you not to do anything that you think is smart. Eunice grabbed the noble girl's arm and slapped her forehead. No matter how she struggled, she had no intention of letting go. In terms of strength, the Demonkin warriors had an absolute advantage. Not to mention a female bard. Even a muscular barbarian warrior would have to concede defeat. Although Chloe was now only a step away from officially becoming a rank 1 bard, she couldn't play her usual role in a real fierce battle. The enemy wasn't a fool who would immediately attack once they heard the music filled with magic. With her current skills, she might not even be able to survive a single round. Therefore, even if she went to help, it would be more of a hindrance. Everyone might even have to divert their attention to protect her from harm. Let go of me. Let go. I want to save Andre. Can't you hear that he's in great pain right now? Chloe struggled with all her might, as if she had gone mad. A series of hysterical roars came from her mouth. It was completely different from her usual lively and playful personality. It was as if she was a completely different person. Seeing the girl's relentless pestering, Eunice's suppressed anger also erupted. She grabbed Chloe's collar and directly lifted her up. She growled in a low voice. I know. Of course I know. But do you understand why he's doing this? Isn't it so that you can escape alive? Do you think I don't want to go and help? Now shut your mouth immediately. Stay here obediently. The same goes for all of you. Remember, Master's order is for us to leave immediately after fixing the sails and rudder. If anyone dares to disobey the order, don't blame me for being ruthless. As ferocious expressions appeared on the half-demons' faces, the eye of Mystical was instantly filled with an oppressive atmosphere. This was especially true for the men of action, led by Bartholomew and Uruzi. Their eyes emitted a chilling glint. Each and every one of them held their weapons, looking as if they were about to fight. Whether it was Eunice, Uraz, Chloe, or Bartholomew, all of them were unruly people. Usually, when Andre was here, all the conflicts were suppressed. But once he wasn't, the conflicts immediately erupted. Just as the group was about to start fighting, the elven druid Nina, who had been standing at the side without saying a word, suddenly stepped forward and said in an emotionless tone, Enough! Put down your weapons. This is not the time for internal strife. Although I'm a little unwilling, Eunice is right. Master's orders must be obeyed. So, raise the sails and set sail immediately. Leave the sea area. If anyone dares to disobey the order, I'll let them be completely swallowed by the sea. After saying that, she suddenly raised her right hand and released a powerful natural energy. Not long after, a large number of sharks began to appear in the surrounding seawater one after another. Now, no matter who jumped into the sea, they would only end up as supper for the sharks. Everyone present knew about the relationship between Nina and Andre, especially Chloe, who knew about the druid's origins. Even if everyone on the ship betrayed Andre, this elf would never do so. Because she was a life form created by magic, she would never betray her master. Seeing that the rescue operation could no longer continue, the survivors on the ship could only follow the orders left behind by the captain. They hung the sails on the remaining mast and slowly set sail in the direction of the deserted island. At the same time, Andre, who was fighting the Spirit King, was staring with his 2 orange eyes as his intestines were being pulled out of his stomach bit by bit. The intense pain caused his consciousness and vision to become blurry. Sweat had long since soaked his clothes, and he looked as if he had just been fished out of the water. Ha 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 ha. How does it feel? You must know that not everyone gets to see their intestines being slowly pulled out with their own eyes. I believe you must be experiencing a great thrill right now. Don't worry, my friend. This is just the beginning. I'll pull out every single one of your internal organs from your body, Navid Rustam said with a look of satisfaction. Your ability is organ harvesting? Andre asked with hurried breathing as he resisted the urge to lose consciousness. He could sense that his physical strength and vitality were rapidly depleting. If he were to lose consciousness at this moment, he would be like a piece of meat on a chopping board. There would be no chance of survival. Therefore, he He could only clench his teeth and hang on. The Spirit King held onto a section of intestines and shook his head playfully. No, my ability isn't as simple as organ harvesting. To be precise, it's through controlling the blood flow speed in a living being's body, creating a strong pressure that's enough to break through the blood vessels, muscles, and skin. Then there'll be a loud bang. Blood? Blood? So, that illusory hand of yours is just a medium. Once it comes into contact with blood, you'll be able to control them. After forcing himself to finish this sentence, Andre immediately felt a sweetness in his throat. Within a few seconds, blood gushed out from his nostrils, mouth, and ears like a flood. It was accompanied by intense coughing. Looking at Andre's miserable state, Navid Rustam bent down and stuck close to Andre's pair of extremely dim eyes. He lamented playfully, "How is it? My ability isn't bad, right? This is a great power that evolved from devouring hundreds and thousands of souls. In fact, even though you've killed me, I don't hate you at all. In fact, I'm grateful because you bestowed me with a new life. Fate. It's really a very wonderful thing. Take me, for example. When I was alive, I was merely a lowly sailor. But who would have thought that after I died, I'd become a spirit king at the very top of the undead creatures? The reason why I want to kill you is because of my obsession. It's like hunger, incessantly devouring my heart and rationality. Only by killing you will this devouring stop. Only then will I have the chance to advance to a higher level. Remember, this isn't a personal grudge. It's a hunt and a meal. You're the food that I desire to devour the most. Look at your miserable state right now. Humans are really very fragile creatures. Let me end this painful torment and let everything return to peace. Farewell, young genius. I'll inherit your pride, wisdom, and character. I'll devour your soul, absorb all your memories, and only. Perhaps your fate is to make me stronger." Chapter 4:24. As the last word fell, the Spirit King suddenly raised his hand and instantly stabbed it into Andre's chest, directly detonating the heart on the left side. Scarlet blood immediately gushed out, and Andre's entire body withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The black fog belonging to death slowly shrouded the surroundings, and his skin also became dull. Only his eyes were still as bright as before. The large amount of blood loss caused Andre to gradually lose consciousness, as if he had entered a very mysterious state. There was no pain, no torture, no cold. Everything disappeared without a trace after the excessive blood loss. It was as if there was an invisible force guiding him to another world, a world that only souls could go to. Is this death? Am I already dead? I really didn't expect death to be so easy. It's completely like a form of release, just as Andre was about to give up everything and pass through the door that opened before him. A low murmur suddenly rang out in his ears. "No, you can't die yet. Wake up quickly. You still have a mission to complete. Descendant, call my name. Become my emissary in the material world. I will bestow upon you a long life. Power that will make the world tremble. My name is Isoldezer, Prince of the Fire Element, Controller of the Flames of Wrath." Over and over again, it was as if he was hallucinating in his half-asleep state. There was no sense of reality at all. In fact, ever since his fire elemental bloodline was awakened, he would occasionally hear similar voices. It was just that the previous voices were too vague, and he could not hear the specific content clearly. However, at this moment, the murmur was at least 10 times louder, and some of the originally vague sentences had also become clear. It was as if he was in a state of near death in a trance, and his hearing had become even sharper. Andre had heard that demons and devils would use whispers to tempt the souls of mortals who had just died. Thus, he did not know if he should respond to the other party, let alone whether those illusory promises would really be fulfilled. Just as he was about to die, a green light suddenly descended from the sky, starting to tear apart the soul that had yet to leave the body. There is no need to ask to know that the Spirit King was definitely impatient to taste the unique taste of the mage's soul, as well as the large amount of memories and knowledge it contained. It was very obvious that he had no other choice now. He could only try everything he could, chanting in his heart, the great prince of the fire element, Isoldezer, master of the flames of wrath. I call upon you and beg for your help. Please resurrect me and give me strength to defeat this evil undead before me. Just a second later, the mysterious voice rang in his ears again. Human with the fire elemental bloodline, your ancestor signed a contract with me 4,000 years ago. He swore that he was willing to walk across material planes and use the flames of destruction to spread my name and gain the fear and reverence of mortals. If you are willing to continue fulfilling this contract, then I will be able to pass through the barrier of the material plane and grant you the ability to use the flames of wrath. At the same time, I will grant you the title of Flaming Duke. Now, tell me your answer. I'm willing. I am willing to continue fulfilling this contract. He was also willing to accept the title of Flaming Duke. Give me strength. Otherwise, that damned undead will tear my soul apart. Seeing that the Spirit King's dragging force was getting increasingly stronger, Andre could no longer be bothered to bargain. He agreed to all the conditions at one go, loudly urging the other party to fulfill the agreement. Now, he only wanted to get out of this dangerous situation as soon as possible. He could only leave the rest for later. After all, no matter what, it was impossible for a situation worse than having his soul devoured to happen. When the unknown creature who called himself Isoldezer heard this, he immediately let out a maniacal laugh. Ha 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 ha! Then the contract is established. Finally, I finally have another envoy in the material plane. Go and be angry. Go and destroy. Use the overflowing flames to incinerate everything. Let all mortals tremble in fear under my might. Remember, you must make a sacrifice to me once a year and use the ability that I grant you to turn a city into ashes or burn more than 5,000 intelligent beings to death. Otherwise, I will take back this power and give you the corresponding punishment for violating the contract. Of course, if you can exceed the requirements, I will also grant you more power as a reward. Now go and release all the anger and madness that has accumulated in your heart. Burn that undead who dares to offend the Flaming Duke into ashes. The moment the last word was spoken, Andre suddenly felt a scorching heat burning in his chest. He saw a ball of dark blue flames appear where his heart was, and then quickly spread throughout his body, transforming his body at an extremely fast speed. In just 1 or 2 seconds, every single pore on his body was emitting an unimaginable high temperature. His originally red hair was instantly replaced by dark blue flames. He was surprised to find that his consciousness had returned to his physical body. His shattered heart had completely healed under the effects of the unknown flames, and his torn intestines had also grown back. The huge wounds on his abdomen and chest had completely disappeared, and his skin was smooth without a trace of a scar. Unbelievable. It was simply too unbelievable. The scene before him had completely overturned Andre's understanding of the world. He looked at himself floating in mid-air in astonishment, gently stroking his smooth skin and muttering to himself, the scars on my body have actually all disappeared. How is this possible? That's right. Ever since he came to this world, in order to better survive, he had been hunting near the dark forest in the north of Lonely Mountain Town. There were not many parts of his body that were intact, and scars covered more than 15% of his body, especially his heart that had just been ruptured by his blood pressure. It was now tightly integrated with the dark blue flames, forming a fist-sized core. It kept beating, sending hot blood to every corner of his body, and an endless stream of energy filled his limbs and brain. Just as Andre was silently feeling the changes in his body, Navid Rustam suddenly fell to the ground, rolling and struggling, and at the same time, letting out a miserable cry. Damn it, damn it, damn it. What kind of monster are you? I can actually use flames to burn my soul. 2 balls of dark blue flames were constantly burning on his pale white claws, and no matter how he slapped them, there was no sign of extinguishing them. Even the dense negative energy could not do anything to them. Chapter 425. This is the power bestowed by the fire elemental prince, Isoldezer. Flames fueled by anger. As a mage who was particularly sensitive to energy, Andre could tell at a glance the difference between these dark blue flames and the red flames from before. The latter was merely an ordinary oxidation-reduction reaction mentioned in chemistry, while the former was a special phenomenon that belonged to the exchange of magical energy. Even though he was still unable to determine why anger would be transformed into flames, one thing was certain. The angrier a person was, the more vigorous the dark blue flames would burn until the body and soul were completely burned to ashes. Without a doubt, this was an extremely terrifying power. There was no way to extinguish it by cutting off oxygen, unless the target himself calmed down and let all the anger in his heart be appeased. It would only add more fuel to the flames. In just a few seconds, nearly 1/10 of the negative energy gathered on Navid Rustam's body had dissipated. The two balls of flames were like gluttonous children, rapidly devouring the emotion called anger and growing stronger little by little. However, the Spirit King was no idiot. Seeing that he could not extinguish the flames, he immediately turned around and glared with his two blood-red eyes, roaring crazily. "It's you. I knew it must have been you who did it. Why can't you just obediently die like the others? Let me devour your soul." Looking at the other party's distorted expression due to the intense pain, Andre's eyes shot out two rays of cold light. He sneered and mocked. "Devour my soul? You think you're worthy? No matter how powerful you are, you have not changed your nature as a lowly sailor. You have succumbed to the primitive instincts of undead creatures, or rather, hunger and thirst, aimlessly slaughtering living beings to satisfy the emptiness that you can't fill no matter what. No plan, no thinking. You don't even have the most basic rationality. From top to bottom, you emit chaotic and evil tendencies. You're even more disgusting than the demons in the bottomless abyss. I was a little careless just now and didn't notice the ability you evolved after becoming an undead. But now that I have a full understanding of you, it's time to settle the score. Are you ready to pay the price for infuriating me? Price? You think that controlling blood is all I can do? Since that's the case, I'll let you experience the true power of the Spirit King. Absolutely invincible power. As he spoke, Navid Rustam's body suddenly emitted a blinding green light. Then, a large number of illusory shadows emerged from his body. One after another, the negative energy that was so dense that it almost materialized rapidly shrouded the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the number exceeded 1,000 and was still increasing. These translucent shadows had painful expressions on their faces. Their mouths were wide open as if they were howling, but no sound came out. Through their bodies, it could be seen that their souls had been distorted by some kind of power, and there was no way to return to normal. Despair, those pairs of eyes without a shred of hope, constantly stimulated the negative emotions of the living. If one's mind was not firm, they would immediately become one of them. Enduring the intense pain caused by the flames burning his soul, Navid Rustam grinned and shouted, "How is it? This is the true power of the Spirit King. Any soul that I devour will become a part of my body, and at the same time, a member of the Ghost Army. I'd like to see how you're going to withstand the attacks of tens of thousands of spirits. Charge, my loyal servant. Tear this human into pieces." Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Following the command, thousands of shadows immediately swarmed over from all directions, like a flood erupting in an instant. The scene of them baring their fangs and brandishing their claws was enough to make anyone shudder. However, Andre's reaction was very calm. He merely stood where he was and scanned the surroundings with a slightly cold gaze, a hint of mockery hanging at the corner of his mouth. He looked as if he had just completed the transformation from rationality to insanity. An indescribable rage surged from the bottom of his heart. Scenes of humiliation in the past began to appear before his eyes, incessantly stimulating every inch of his nerves. He did not know why he, who had always been calm, had become like this. Perhaps it was because of the dark blue flames burning fiercely on the surface of his body, or perhaps it was because of his sense of crisis at the moment of death. In any case, the endless rage was converted into a huge amount of energy. Not only did this energy break through the dam called rationality, it also broke through all mental restraints. It was like a volcano that had been silent for a long time had suddenly erupted. Even his consciousness gradually became blurry, as if there was only one emotion in the entire world, and that was anger. Boundless anger was erupting nonstop. More and more energy was accumulating. Just as a large number of specters were about to touch his skin, Andre's body was like a nuclear weapon that had reached the tipping point, fiercely releasing a dazzling light that directly illuminated the pitch-black night sky. It was like the sun releasing light, heat, and flames. In just a few seconds, the scorching blue flames engulfed the surface of the sea within a radius of several kilometers. All the spirits, ships, corpses, and even seawater were vaporized in large amounts in just a short moment, leaving behind only the howls of pain that reverberated in the air. Those were the cries released by the souls before they were completely annihilated. There was no pity. There was no hatred. There was only the flames of destruction that burned everything. It was so pure, so dazzling, so much so that the bright moonlight and the stars in the sky seemed to pale in comparison. The negative energy and fog that pervaded the surface of the sea were completely dispelled in a matter of seconds. General Zach, the commander of the Bakarov fleet, who was a few kilometers away, happened to witness this scene. He was so shocked that he could not speak. His entire body trembled nonstop, and he even rubbed his eyes hard, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. In fact, it was not only him. Everyone on the deck who saw the scene of the dark blue flames erupting were also in disbelief. Many of them who had been greatly affected even knelt on the ground and trembled, incessantly praying to the gods they believed in, hoping that the terrifying flames would not fall on their heads. Damn it. Who can tell me what's going on? General Zach, who had regained his senses, roared hysterically at the mages behind him. Due to his overly agitated emotions, his saliva splattered everywhere, more than 60% of it landing on the mages' faces. Chapter 426. However, the mages were not in the mood to care. One of the older mages stood up and replied with a trembling voice, General, that is the flame of wrath. It belongs to the fire elemental prince, Isoldezer. Run, or we'll be too late. There must be an emissary here, an emissary of disaster and destruction. What emissary? Who is the fire elemental prince, Isoldezer? Tell me clearly. General Zach, who had lost control of his emotions, grabbed the mage by the collar and asked loudly with a nervous face. Although the fog had filled the air, he could clearly see the scene of the huge fleet evaporating in a short moment. In his opinion, that was definitely not a power that a human should have. At least, it should not appear on a young man, unless the other party was a god's chosen. The mage glanced at Andre, who was floating in the air, with fear. He subconsciously shivered and hurriedly suppressed the urge to immediately escape. He quickly explained, Isoldezer is one of the most powerful lords in the fire elemental world. It is said that his power is second only to the fire elemental goddess, Belua. He controls the flame of wrath with the highest temperature. Different from the other elements, he likes to make mortals fear him and revere him. Therefore, every once in a while, he will bestow a descendant with his bloodline as an emissary. He calls them the Flaming Duke, and humans call them the Duke of Destruction. No matter where they go, they will burn everything to ashes. Since the God of Gods blessed the mortal world with protection and prohibited powerful creatures from descending, there were fewer and fewer people with special bloodlines on the whole continent, especially the elemental bloodlines that were originally very thin. Therefore, there had been no news of the appearance of the Flaming Duke for more than 600 years. But now, the Flaming Duke has appeared again. He would definitely burn everything on the surface of the sea to ashes. If we don't hurry and escape, we will be dead. General, I beg you, quickly turn the fleet around. We must leave immediately. This is not a joke. It is not a suggestion. It is an order. I command you as the chief mage of the army. There is a powerful existence here that we cannot resist at all. Retreat immediately. Retreat. Perhaps it was the mad roar of the chief mage that made General Zack realize how dangerous the situation was, or perhaps he had already thought of retreating. Either way, after hearing the name of the Flaming Duke, his face turned ashen, and he ordered the fleet to return without thinking. The mages were afraid that they would not be able to run fast enough, so they quickly cast the wind creation spell so that the sails of the ship were fully opened, and they quickly escaped from the sea. This was not because they were timid, but because the name of the Flaming Duke was too famous in Orire. Although they had not appeared for more than 600 years, the songs about them had long been changed into countless stories by bards and were even recorded in many books. To sum it up, the Flaming Duke had destroyed many cities and towns, especially in the south. Although it was not as exaggerated as the legend said, it was true that they could not control their anger. Often, when they were slightly provoked or insulted, they would immediately turn on their destructive mode. On the other side, on the Eye of Arcane, which was slowly moving away, many people cheered loudly when they saw the appearance of Andre's invincible might. Especially Chloe, who had been worried after hearing the screams. She jumped up excitedly. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes while muttering to Eunice beside her, "I knew it. I knew it. You'll be fine. Look at those warships that ambushed us. They were all destroyed. He is indeed my hero. Long live." Huh. You know, I wonder who was the one who was so nervous that she secretly wiped her tears. Eunice said with disdain. "I was just concerned." Chloe retorted loudly with a red face. However, her appearance was obviously not convincing. Not only was Eunice snickering, but even the surviving crew members couldn't help but laugh out loud. Everything that had happened that night had been too sudden. First, they had been chased away by Bakarov's fleet, and then they had been ambushed. Many of their companions had died because of this, and they had been extremely depressed. Now that the dark clouds had finally parted and the huge fleet that had ambushed them had been destroyed, all of the pressure in their hearts had been completely released. Although the time they spent together was not long, in their eyes, their captain was almost omnipotent. Whether it was building a disdainful warship like the Eye of Arcane with his own strength, or forging alchemy weapons like cannons and muskets that could easily destroy the enemy, he was simply a genius that only appeared in bard stories. In addition, he was willing to share a large amount of profits with the ordinary sailors. This was something that was simply impossible in the noble class. Now that they saw that Andre was safe and even displayed his invincible might while floating majestically in the sky like a god, how could they not cheer loudly as his subordinates? Perhaps they could proudly boast about tonight's experience to their wives and children when they return home. However, they didn't notice that the captain's eyes were different from usual. There were no other emotions apart from anger, as though he had completely turned into the embodiment of anger, allowing the tyrannical emotions to accumulate as much as he could, waiting for the next eruption. As for the Spirit King, Navid Rustam, who was also floating in midair, he didn't die under the scorching blue flames. He relied on the tenacious vitality of an undead creature to escape the calamity. However, his body turned from translucent green to completely transparent, and the red radiance in his eyes dimmed as though he would dissipate into the air at any moment. Without a doubt, he was fatally injured. If it weren't for the huge amount of negative energy that he had accumulated, perhaps he would have been vaporized by the terrifying flames along with the warships and corpses, disappearing from this world forever. What Navid Rustam wanted to do the most right now was to turn around and flee immediately. But he knew that if he were to expose his back to the enemy, he would only end up dying faster and more tragically. In fact, he was beginning to regret his decision to go to such extremes just now, which resulted in an irreconcilable hatred. Otherwise, he could have used other means, such as negotiation, to resolve the crisis in front of him, instead of floating in the air anxiously. Chapter 427. Don't think that undead creatures aren't afraid of death. On the contrary, undead creatures with intelligence and independent personalities usually cherish their lives. Unless they were like liches who could come back from the dead, most undead creatures wouldn't play around with their lives. It was apparent that Navid Rustam wanted to stall for time, or rather, wait for the other party's wrath to subside a little before negotiating. But it was a pity that he miscalculated. Ever since his wrath broke through all mental shackles, Andre was no longer Andre. He was a puppet controlled by the wrath in his mind. He had no ability to think at all, and was only left with the instinct to destroy. The reason why he hadn't made a move yet was that he was waiting for his wrath to reach its peak before detonating and turning everything around him into ashes. It could be said that even though the man and the ghost had different goals, they were both thinking of the same thing, which was to wait and be prepared to get rid of the other party completely the next time. Burn! Ignite the anger in the depths of your heart. Burn this world to ashes. My emissary, my flaming duke, let the mortals tremble under your tyrannical strength. Let the whole world crawl under your feet. Go! Use your strongest attack to kill that undead creature who dares to offend you. Tell everyone on this continent that I, the Fire Elemental Prince, Asir Rustam, have returned. Ever since he signed the contract, Andre's mind had been echoing with such a voice. It seemed to have some sort of magical power that could make those who heard it angry uncontrollably, turning them into a moving barrel of explosives. The slightest external stimulation would cause them to go berserk, just like what was happening now. There was no rational thought, nor was there any profit or loss mixed in. There was only the thought of destroying the enemy before him. At this moment, Andre had completely released all the desires, instincts, and negative emotions that he usually suppressed at the bottom of his heart, providing sufficient fuel for the dark blue fire of destruction. His two eyes were like that of a demon lord that had just crawled out of the bottomless abyss, devoid of humanity. Fear, trembling. Navid Rustam felt every part of his soul warning him that if he couldn't withstand the next attack, he would definitely die. Moreover, he would die a very ugly death. It must be noted that less than a day ago, he was merely a lowly sailor at the bottom of society. Although he had become the king of spirits by chance and absorbed the memories and knowledge of thousands of human souls, he was still essentially the same pathetic nobody. Be it his way of thinking, combat experience, personality, or habits, he had not completely transformed. Perhaps slaughtering those who were far weaker than him was nothing, but once he encountered a truly powerful enemy, he would immediately reveal his true form. In fact, the Spirit King's abilities were very powerful. They included invisibility, passing through walls, immunity to physical attacks, immunity to charm and control spells, immunity to instant death spells, immunity to diseases, cold, poison, and a series of negative statuses. Its two eyes could release paralyzing gaze, and it could cast Berserk Charm 3 times a day. It could control the blood flow in living creatures' bodies and turn the souls it had devoured into a spirit army. All in all, if he could master all of the above abilities and abandon his cowardly personality, he would immediately become a terrifying enemy. Even if a great mage came, it would be very difficult to kill him. Even if he couldn't defeat Andre, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, Navid Rustam had only become the king of spirits for less than a day, and he still had the mentality of a petty person intoxicated by success. He only wanted to take revenge for the humiliation he had received in the past, which was why he went on a killing spree. Now that he was facing the completely berserk Andre, he couldn't muster up any fighting spirit. His mind was filled with thoughts of how to save his life. As everyone knew, the factors that affected the outcome of a battle, apart from one's own strength, ability, battle tactics, reaction speed, and so on, the most important factor was courage. Any life would instinctively fear death. This was their nature, and there was no way to change it. However, if one cowered because of this, it wouldn't take long for them to die in a battle of equal strength. Those who didn't dare to risk their lives didn't have the qualifications and ability to retreat from an intense battle of life and death. Even though it sounded ironic, that was the truth. This world was filled with all kinds of dangers. Law and morality couldn't restrain the actions of all intelligent life. Therefore, only those who knew when to risk their lives and when to retreat could live longer. Huff, 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 hee hee, ha ha. Andre, who had been gasping for breath, suddenly burst into a maniacal laughter. Then he revealed a mouthful of white teeth and extended his right hand to release the power of the raging flames of fury. He muttered to himself, "Not enough, not enough. My raging flames can still burn more vigorously. Why don't I evaporate you and this sea completely?" Evaporate the sea? Navid Rustam was instantly stunned by this arrogant declaration. An expression of disbelief appeared on his translucent face. A huge sense of crisis surged from the bottom of his heart. Without saying a word, he immediately entered stealth mode and turned around to fly into the distance. He didn't dare to imagine how terrifying the next attack would be if this statement was true. In his current state, there was no way he could survive. Just as the Phantom King fled less than 30 meters away, Andre suddenly opened his arms and roared with all his might. "Come, my anger, release it all. Let the world see what the true flames of destruction are." As soon as his voice trailed off, a dazzling light erupted from his chest, once again illuminating the dark night sky. But this time, the eruption was even more violent than the previous one. The terrifying heat could even be felt by the Bakharov fleet a few kilometers away. Some of the ships behind had their sails set ablaze by the heat wave. What was even more terrifying was that the several thousand meters of seawater beneath Andre's feet had completely evaporated, forming a cylindrical hole that was more than 600 meters in diameter. All the fish, prawns, crabs, shellfish, corals, and so on within this area were all in a charred state. As for the poor Navid Rustam, he was completely dead the moment the flames erupted, leaving only a palm-sized translucent substance that was blown into Andre's palm by the sea breeze. It looked like it was in between substance and nothingness. It had no weight at all, just like a soul. Chapter 428. In fact, if Andre regained his senses, he would immediately recognize that this thing was the soul core left behind by the King of the Spirits. It carried the purest essence of himself and thousands of souls. It was the best material for making magical items on Orir, almost comparable to the blood and scales of giant dragons. But unfortunately, Andre was now in a state of uncontrollable state and did not realize how precious this thing was. He just subconsciously grabbed it in his hand, then lost consciousness and fell straight from the sky. Shock, fear. After General Zack saw the huge hole in the middle of the sea, his expression changed drastically. He immediately shouted at the chief mage behind him, "Immediately use all the magic that can accelerate the ship. Quick, or else." Before he could finish his words, the surrounding seawater immediately began to surge toward the hole, letting out a series of loud roars. Terrifying waves rose up to tens of meters high. In the blink of an eye, those ships that did not have enough displacement or center of gravity were overturned or smashed to pieces. In just a few seconds, the entire fleet had lost 1/3 of its members. In addition, countless crew members had fallen into the surging seawater, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Of course, this was just the beginning. As everyone knew, once all the seawater surged toward a point, it meant a rapid undercurrent and a huge whirlpool. It was obvious that a hole with a diameter of more than 600 meters and a depth of several thousand meters was definitely enough to breed a whirlpool of death that swallowed all the ships. If they were sucked in, there was no chance of survival. Mages, all mages, get ready. Wind creation spell. Quickly cast the wind creation spell. I don't care if you use scrolls. Magical items. It's best if you use them all before we are all buried at the bottom of the sea. Seeing that the huge whirlpool had formed, General Zack completely threw away his so-called nobleman's dignity and roared at the top of his lungs. He knew very well that if he wanted to survive, he must provide the ship with enough power to escape the deadly gravitational force of the whirlpool. Otherwise, with the wooden structure of the ship, as long as it approached the center area, it would undoubtedly be shredded into pieces by the terrifying torrent. On the other side, the Eye of Arcane was in a much better situation. On one hand, they were far enough away from the vortex, so they would not be affected by it. On the other hand, as the vice captain, Bartholomew was commanding the sailors to operate the bronze cannons and fire at the same time. He was relying on the propelling force of the gunpowder to break away from the suction of the vortex. Coupled with Nina's control over nature, in theory, they should not be sacrificed to the vortex. The culprit, Andre, was now unconscious. He fell into the turbulent sea and was swallowed by the current in the blink of an eye, disappearing without a trace. Just as he disappeared, the sky suddenly emitted a dazzling blue flame. A few seconds later, two huge hands tore apart the stars in the sky, revealing a pair of terrifying eyes. The owner of the pair of eyes first glanced at the majestic maelstrom on the surface of the sea, then listened to the screams and wails of the Bakharov fleet for a while. Immediately, a satisfied expression appeared on his face, and he roared in a low voice, "Well done, my agent in the material plane." The mortals once again heard the name of Aesop Desir. He had witnessed the power of the angry flames of the fire elemental plane. As a reward, I hereby officially bestow upon you the title of Flaming Duke. At the same time, I give you the authority of faith. Go, spread my name with destruction and death. Thy name is Andre Blancheflower, the 20th Flaming Duke. I, as the Prince of Fire, will completely activate the bloodline in your body. From now on, you are my chosen. Use destruction and sacrifice to please me. As the last word fell, Aesop Desir opened his mouth and spat out a golden spark that fell into the sea. A minute later, Andre, who had been swept into the center of the maelstrom, jumped out of the sea with a bang, his body emitting a dazzling brilliance. Everyone could see that the spark had drilled into his chest, quickly transforming his body and soul. When all the energy was about to be exhausted, the golden spark instantly exploded, producing an extremely terrifying pressure. With the help of this force, the unconscious Andre immediately drew a parabola in the sky and landed on the sea dozens of kilometers away. With the impact of the waves, he quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. After doing all this, Aesop Desir laughed loudly and merged the torn sky again. He completely returned to the fire elemental plane, ready to celebrate today's harvest. It should be known that the enchantment set up by the God of Gods was no joke. Even with Andre as a special medium, coupled with his own power that was not inferior to the gods, he could only let his avatar squeeze in a little at most. The purpose was to brand his own mark on the Chosen, and at the same time, give the other party the power he deserved. Chosen, as the name implied, were the people chosen by God, special individuals who were granted power beyond that of mortals. However, their levels were uneven. Among them, the most powerful ones were able to fight head-on with the gods without falling into a disadvantageous position, while the weakest were only a little stronger than a senior professional, or even just an ordinary person. For some special reasons, they were chosen and bestowed with some special abilities. Perhaps a few gangsters could beat them to the ground. In general, chosen were equivalent to mortals who were recognized, loved, and trusted by the gods or powerful creatures from other worlds comparable to the gods. Usually, they had an almost endless lifespan. Unless they did something that angered the boss behind them, it was not a problem for them to live for hundreds or thousands of years. Although they were called the people chosen by God, in fact, the Devil Duke in hell, the Demon Lord in the bottomless abyss, the powerful creatures in heaven, the prince of the elemental world, and even the ancient dragons who had lived to a certain age could give one or two mortals similar power. Obviously, the power of the fire elemental prince, Aesop Desir, was definitely not inferior to most of the gods, so the golden flame he gave was a seed, enough to let the mortal body complete a metamorphosis and gain more and more powerful abilities. Most importantly, the core secret of the fire of wrath was nurtured there. Although Andre's current ability was not enough to completely control it, it could greatly improve his basic attributes and affinity to the fire element. Of course, this power was given by Aesop Desir, so he could take it back at any time if he wanted. However, considering the number of descendants of the fire elemental in the material plane, it was estimated that the possibility of taking it back was infinitely close to zero. Chapter 429. After all, once Aesop Desir lost his chosen priests and worshippers, he would no longer be able to sense what was happening on the Olyre continent. For a fire elemental prince who loved to spread his name, this was worse than any torture. It had been more than 600 years since he had found someone who could answer his call. Now that he finally found one, he would not let it go easily. Unless he could find a second replacement, Andre would continue to enjoy the benefits of the golden flames. This was especially so for a profession like the mage, whose strength and constitution were seriously low. The only thing he needed to consider was the negative impact of the title of the Flaming Duke. After all, in the eyes of most ordinary people and nobles, the chosen of Aesop Desir meant disaster and destruction. No matter where he went, he would be ostracized to a certain extent. Perhaps he would not be imprisoned or exiled, but in any case, caution, prejudice, and hostility were unavoidable. Humans were a race that liked to demonize or mythologize those who were too powerful. This could be seen from the ancient myths on Earth. In ancient Greece, when the democratic system was at its most developed, they actually designed such an extremely stupid law as the Shell anti-exile law. The specific content was that when the Archon reached a certain period of time, everyone would bring a shell over and write the name of their favorite Archon on it. After that, the Archon would be counted, and whoever had the most names would be banished. In history, the only one who was exiled by this law was Mysticals. The reason was that he performed exceptionally well in the Battle of Salamis. The famous thinker and philosopher Socrates also died under a similar law. Then why did such a strange law exist? The reason was simple. The strong jealousy of humans was at work. On the surface, this law was to ensure the continuation of the democratic system and prevent the emergence of a dictatorship due to a certain person's prestige, but in fact, it was a butcher's knife that killed the elites of society. However, they forgot that the so-called politics, military, and ruling of the country were all done by the elites. The so-called democracy would only bring about chaos and turmoil. This was because most people did not have a strategic vision, nor did they know how to make complicated economic, institutional, legal, and national policies. Even in the 21st century, where education was highly popular, more than 90% of ordinary people still had limited vision. Even if they were given a village with no more than 200 people, they might not be able to manage it well, let alone a huge country. Not a single country could truly be like ancient Greece, where there was a parliament of 50 to 60,000 people from different social classes, where they argued, quarreled, and voted every day, because the ancient Greek city-state was defeated by the autocratic Spartan city-state in the end. Even an idiot knew how unreliable pandemocracy was. Obviously, the failure of the ancient Greek city-states taught us that the people were not as pure and kind as advertised. Perhaps a small portion of them could maintain their original intentions, but most of them were easily dominated by their desires. Once they grasped true power, they would immediately transform into bloodthirsty demons. If they were allowed to vote to decide Andre's life or death, the only outcome would be that he would be executed, and there would be no possibility of him being spared. Fortunately, Oryre was a place where the traditional feudal system accounted for more than 80% of the population. Even if there were a few republics, they were aristocratic republics and had nothing to do with the civilians. As long as he did not go too far and arouse the hatred of the aristocrats, he was theoretically still very safe. In any case, the Flaming Duke was also the chosen of the Prince of Fire Elements, and Aesop Desir was not in the evil camp. Whether it was the churches of the gods or the ruling class, they at least had to give him the appropriate respect. Otherwise, the nickname of the Duke of Destruction was not for nothing. Especially the destructive power caused by his rampage. He could easily burn large cities, such as Lincoln City, into ruins. But these had little to do with Andre for the time being, because his eyes were closed and he was drifting on the sea with the waves, showing no signs of waking up. Cold, weak, empty, confused, sore all over. He did not know how long he had been unconscious after the rampage, nor did he know why he felt so uncomfortable. Andre finally began to slowly regain consciousness. He vaguely felt that someone had picked him up from the sea and then carried him to a bed. Not long after, this person began to scrub his body, feed him water, and feed him fish soup. Although he wanted to open his mouth and say thank you, his body was so weak that he did not even have the strength to make a sound. Soon, he fell into a deep sleep again. How is it? Is this young man's life in danger? A strong young man about 8 meters tall, with well-proportioned muscles, asked with concern. Because he was exposed to the wind and sun every day at sea, his skin showed a healthy bronze color, and his square face looked upright and steady. He was only wearing a pair of shorts, and he did not even have a pair of shoes on his feet. The girl who had just finished feeding Andre the fish soup smiled sweetly, put the bowl on the table next to her, and replied, "Don't worry, Brother Mabel, he's fine. It's just that he has been in the sea for a long time, and he hasn't eaten for too long, so his body is a little weak. I believe he will be fine after a few days." "That's right. Where did you save him?" The young man called Mabel opened his mouth and revealed 2 rows of white teeth. Fiona, I found this person by chance when I was out fishing. Moreover, his attire and the items he carries with him are not ordinary. He must be a descendant of a noble family who met with misfortune, so I came back. It's not my style to leave someone in the lurch." "Noble? No wonder he is so handsome, and the color of his hair is so special." As she spoke, the girl called Fiona stretched out a hand and gently lifted a small tuft of white, no, to be exact, silver translucent hair. Ever since Andre fell into the water, his originally fiery red hair, eyes, and eyebrows all seemed to have exhausted their energy. There was no trace of fire elemental energy at all. Only the strange heart hidden in his chest faintly released unusual fluctuations. Of course, look at the things in your waist pouch. A wooden stick inlaid with rubies, hundreds of Alliance gold coins, a book that can't be opened, a box that can't be opened either, a total of 40 bottles of magic potions, and look at this sharp scimitar and dagger. I dare to bet that you won't find a second one, even in the entire Sardinia Islands. Also, look at the rings he is wearing on his hand. One of them is a seal ring that only nobles would wear, and it should have his family emblem on it. After saying that, Mabel pointed at Andre's finger that was wearing the seal ring. Chapter 430. Fiona quickly grabbed it and examined it carefully. Soon, she revealed a trace of unconcealable surprise. Wow, it really is a noble seal. Oh my God, my dearest brother, you actually saved a nobleman. When he wakes up, he will definitely give you a large sum of money as a reward. Mabel scratched her head embarrassedly. Ha, I didn't expect that we would have a day like this. Remember, take care of these things. Don't let anyone see them, and don't use them without permission. Although we are very poor, we will never take advantage of others. Understood. Don't worry, I will hide everything. If others smell it, just say that you saved a shipwrecked sailor. Fiona said excitedly. Perhaps as the daughter of a fisherman, she did not have much experience, but she was still a little smart. She understood that if outsiders knew that there was a noble young man lying in her house, and that he had many valuable belongings, it would undoubtedly lead to great danger and trouble. Seeing that her sister understood her meaning, Mabel immediately grabbed the fishing net and harpoon, turned around and walked towards the door. As she walked, she reminded, "Then I will leave the house to you. I still have to go fishing and see if I can catch him conscious. At night, I will make soup for this handsome, noble young master. He is now our hope to leave this archipelago and get rid of poverty. Be more careful when you go out to sea. Try to catch more delicious seafood. I heard that nobles are very picky. Fiona shouted at her brother's back. I know. You just wait at home for me to come back with a full load. Mabel waved her hand without looking back. After watching her brother leave, Fiona quickly opened a piece of floorboard and carefully stuffed all of Andre's clothes and belongings into it. Then, she covered it with the wooden board and returned to the bedside. She stared at the handsome face with a slight infatuation, and then gently combed her messy hair. Soon, a trace of blush appeared on her face. The days in the coma were peaceful and monotonous. Every day, other than eating, he slept. Maybe it was because he lost too much physical strength, or maybe it was because completely releasing all of his anger had a certain impact on his brain. In short, Andre was muddle-headed like a marionette and rested for 3 days. At noon on the 4th day, he finally regained his rationality and ability to think. He slowly opened his eyes and was surprised to find himself lying in a shabby wooden house. Other than 2 beds, there was only a wooden table that was about to rot, 2 benches, a few wooden bowls and plates, and a small amount of dried coconut meat. A large amount of dried fish hung on the wall, and a slightly fishy smell wafted in the air. He slightly moved his stiff neck and just happened to see a young girl of 18 or 19 years old sitting in the middle of the house, humming an unknown tune, cooking in front of a bonfire in the middle of the house. An iron pot was hung on the beam of the house with a rope woven from coconut fiber. Below was a burning firewood. Judging from the rich fragrance, there should be scallops and crabgrass stewing inside. From the back, the girl was dressed quite lightly. Her upper body was only a small vest that wrapped around her chest, and her lower body was a mini skirt that exposed half of her thighs. The fabric was the cheapest linen, and it was washed until it was a little white. However, her figure was very good. Perhaps because she had been swimming for a long time, the muscles of her waist, legs, and lower abdomen were quite well proportioned. Her skin was a healthy wheat color, and her long brown hair cascaded down to her waist like a waterfall. On her arm was a bracelet made of delicate shells and animal teeth. Every time she moved, it would make a clattering sound. In addition, Andre also noticed that the girl had no shoes on her feet, and the soles of her feet were quite thick. At first glance, he could tell that she was used to walking barefoot all year round. In addition, there was nothing similar to shoes in the house. From this, he could conclude that this was a poor family that made a living by fishing, but they did not lack food. After coming to this conclusion, he did not rush to get up. Instead, he silently touched the tattoo on his hand and opened the system to check his status. Name: Andre Blancheflower, the 20th Flaming Duke. Blancheflower is an ancient surname. It was born from the first Flaming Duke, Lucas Blancheflower. After that, the Flaming Duke was also his descendant. Now, this glory has once again fallen on your head. Race: descendant of the fire element, bloodline purity level 5. You are already a genuine half-elemental life. Although on the surface you look no different from an ordinary person, your heart has been replaced by an elemental core. As long as you are willing, you can reveal your true form at any time. Alignment: absolute neutral, deviating towards absolute neutral evil. You have been burning, killing, and looting a little too much recently. Attributes: Strength 7 plus 5, bestowed by the Fire Elemental Prince Isoldeezer. Your strength permanently increases by 5 points. Agility 17, Vitality 10 plus 5, also bestowed by the Fire Elemental Prince Isoldeezer. Your vitality permanently increases by 5 points. Intelligence 22, Perception 12, Charm 9 plus 3. As the chosen of a powerful elemental lord, you are easily feared by others. However, they are not afraid of you, but of the Fire Elemental Prince behind you, Isoldeezer. Profession: Mage level 8 experience required to level up, 59,000/10900 special title. Isoldeezer's chosen level 1. Note: this title is not a profession and cannot be leveled up with experience points. You can only use sacrifices to please the powerful Fire Elemental Prince and gain his approval. From there, you can obtain more benefits. Health points: 6/50ths, extremely weak. Experience points: 68,500 undistributed. Obtains special ability of the chosen. Flame control. Reduces the chanting time of fire spells by 6 seconds. Any spell that does not exceed 6 seconds can be cast. At the same time, the power is doubled. Also, you can transform a prepared arcane spell into a fire spell of the same level. Immune to all forms of fire damage. As the chosen of the fire elemental lord, as well as a fire elemental, how can you be hurt by fire? Flame regeneration. High-temperature flames can heal your wounds. As the saying goes, as long as there is fire, fire elementals will not die so easily. Long lifespan. Although part of your body is still human, your lifespan is still comparable to most elemental creatures. You can live for at least 1,500 years and will never age. Raging flame eruption. You can store your anger during normal times and detonate the dark blue flames of anger at a specific time. Its power is enough to destroy a small town at once. However, the consequences are also very serious. After each explosion, the magic energy will be imbalanced, and you will temporarily lose all abilities related to magic. It will take more than half a month for you to return to normal. Currently, your accumulated anger is 0%. Extraordinary life. You are gradually breaking away from the category of mortals. You can survive without eating, drinking, or breathing for 7 days. Flame flight. You can use the heat generated by the flames to fly for a short period of time. Once a day, the altitude will not exceed 500 meters. The duration will not exceed 5 minutes. Agent of Faith. As the only chosen of Acer Decil in the material plane, you can forcibly turn his devout followers into priests. The target's perception must not be lower than 10, and the number of followers must not exceed 10. Control fire elementals. As the Flaming Duke conferred by the Fire Elemental Prince, you could try to communicate with any fire elementals that are not under the control of magic. Once you succeed, they will obey your orders until they die. As for the success rate, it depends on your strength and its strength. Currently, you can only control large-sized fire elementals. The success rate for any higher-sized fire elementals is basically 0. You can only do it 3 times a day. Note, these abilities come from the Fire Elemental Prince, Acer Decil. If he retracts his power, then all the above abilities will disappear. In addition, because you have forcibly used Raging Flame Eruption twice, the mage profession is temporarily sealed. It will be restored in 45 days. Chapter 431. After looking at his new ability, Andre had a complicated expression on his face. He was both happy and worried at the same time. At the same time, he understood why he could float on the sea for so many days without dying. It was all thanks to his supernatural ability. After all, anyone who had a powerful force in their body that was not under their control would inevitably be worried. Of course, the most important thing was that after his magic power was completely sealed, he was basically an ordinary person with a stronger body. Once he faced danger, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. It was not as simple as losing the ability to cast spells when a magic power was sealed. Even magic scrolls and many items could not be used, such as the teleportation ring on his hand and the badge of the Mage Association. The only good thing was that he could still drink potions. Otherwise, he would really go crazy. Squinting his eyes and thinking for a long time, Andre decided to raise his magic level to level 9 first. Anyway, raising his profession level could slightly increase his HP, which would be of some help. Without hesitation, he added the unallocated EXP to the magic profession before the girl noticed. Are you sure you want to allocate 50,000 EXP to the magic profession? Yes, your magic level has been raised to level 9. You have received 1 ability point. Your magic pet has been raised to level 9. You have used 1 ability point to choose the metamagic ability, Spell Delay. Name, Andre Blancheflower Race, descendant of Fire Elementals Alignment. Absolutely neutral profession. Level 9 mage required EXP to level up. 109000/2900 special profession. Acer Decil's chosen one. Note, this profession cannot be leveled up with EXP. It can only be approved by the powerful prince of fire elementals by offering sacrifices. HP 657, extremely weak, EXP 18500, unallocated, memorizable arcane spells. Level 0, for level 1. 6 level 2. 6 level 3, for level 4. 3 level 5. 2 new ability. Metamagic skill, spell delay. This ability allows you to memorize low-level spells that are 1 level higher than normal spells. It lasts twice as long as normal spells. The principle is basically the same as silent spell casting. Magic pet information name. Small eyes race. Small eyes. Magic creature. Alignment. Neutral evil profession. Magic pet level 9. This creature's level increases with its master's mage level. HP 3434. Healthy. Special abilities. Cold ray. 24 shots per day. Damage ray. 12 per day. As a string of information flashed in his vision, Andre finally completed his advancement from the 8th to the 9th rank. At the same time, he also obtained the 5th rank arcane spell slot that he had always dreamed of. Unfortunately, in his current state, he couldn't learn or memorize new spells, nor could he feel the flow of mana in his body. He didn't even have the strength to lift a finger. All he could do was lie naked on the simple bed and look at the wooden board above his head as he reflected on himself. As a smart person, Andre knew very well how dangerous the battle with the Spirit King had been. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the most dangerous battle he had ever faced since he came to this world. Even his soul had almost been engulfed by the Spirit King, if not for the fact that he had coincidentally heard the cries of the fire elemental prince, Isol Deezer. He might have already become a part of Navid Rustam's spirit army. To a transmigrator, this was really a kind of irony. The near-death experience rang the alarm bell for him. At the same time, he also realized that in this dangerous world, he was still far from being powerful. He had to work hard, and work harder to raise his mage level and become a great mage in the true sense of the word as soon as possible. Otherwise, once he died, it would be useless no matter how great his potential was. He only had one life. Andre, who had already died once, definitely didn't want to experience it a second time. After thinking through this point, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. His mind was also in a state of emptiness. It was as if the madness and impulsiveness from before had completely disappeared. Calm and rational thoughts had once again gained control over them. It seemed like the ability Raging Flame Eruption could really release the impulsiveness, anger, brutality, and other emotions that had accumulated over time. Although the side effects were slightly greater, considering its terrifying might, it was definitely not inferior to any rank 9 Arcana spell. It could definitely be kept as a trump card. First, I was ambushed. Then, I met a Spirit King that was several times stronger than me. I was in a state of near death, but I didn't die. In the end, I succeeded in killing him. The so-called blessing in disguise should be describing the current situation, and the person who saved me didn't have any evil intentions. Could it be that I've really been blessed by the goddess of luck? Andre muttered softly to himself as he struggled to sit up. He looked around for his belongings, especially his scroll box. There was only one rank 5 Arcana spell, teleportation, left in it. If he accidentally lost it, it would take him a lot of effort to return to Lynn City. However, he had clearly forgotten that his body was currently in an extremely weak state. He didn't have enough strength at all. His arms couldn't support him, and he fell off the bed with a plop, landing heavily on the floor. His naked body was completely exposed, and he looked extremely miserable. Cough, cough, cough. It hurts. Damn it, my arms aren't listening to me at all. Does the so-called extremely weak mean that I can't even move? Andre coughed violently as he gritted his teeth and tried to crawl up from the ground. However, all his efforts were in vain. His hands couldn't even hold onto anything, let alone stand up with his own strength. The girl who was cooking was obviously shocked by the sudden accident. She immediately threw down the spoon and hurriedly ran over, asking with great concern, "Heavens, you're actually awake. Don't move around. Let me see if you're injured." Although you don't have any injuries on your body, you've used up a lot of energy. If you don't rest well for a few days, you won't be able to move freely." She muttered as she helped Andre back onto the bed. Her two eyes secretly glanced at the naked male body, and a shy expression quickly appeared on her face. However, there was a trace of surprise hidden under this shyness. "Sorry, I only wanted to check on the condition of my body. Sorry for the trouble. Also, thank you for saving me." Andre didn't notice that someone was peeking at his naked body, and thanked her very politely. No matter what her motives were, at least she had saved his life. Thanking her was the most basic form of courtesy, and he didn't want to be rude in this regard. Chapter 432. Please don't stand on ceremony. Helping those who are in trouble is something every fisherman would do. And it wasn't me who saved you, but my brother. Oh, right. I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Fiona, and my brother is Mabel. He's a fisherman who lives here. He mainly relies on fishing and collecting pearls for a living. As she spoke, the girl who called herself Fiona laid Andre flat and carefully covered him with a blanket. At the same time, she wiped the bruises that were caused when he fell to the ground. She was as gentle as a wife treating her husband. "My name is Andre, and I'm a baron of Linen City. I'm very pleased to meet you, beautiful lady." Andre reluctantly bowed in a very gentlemanly manner. As a mage with an intelligence of 22, he was very clear about what information could be revealed and what information could not be revealed. So, he selectively told a part of the truth and ignored all the parts that involved thrills and intrigue. Perhaps Fiona had never come into contact with such a polite young man. She hurriedly waved her hand and shyly bit her lower lip and said, No, no, I'm not a lady, and I'm not beautiful. I'm just an ordinary descendant of a slave." When she said the last few words, the light in her eyes instantly dimmed. She looked helpless and pitiful. "Slave?" Hearing this word, Andre subconsciously raised his eyebrows and immediately asked, "Can you explain to me what's going on? And where is this place? How far is it from Linton City?" Fiona nodded gently. She first carefully looked around outside the door, then returned to the bed and explained in a low voice, "This is Turtle Island, the outermost part of the Sardinia. It's under the control of the pirate King Francis. It's about a week to half a month's sea route from Linton City. As the Baron of Linton City, you should have heard about how the residents of this archipelago came to be. At first, the pirates only used this archipelago as a hiding place. They stored all the looted treasures, goods, and ships in a secret location. But as the number of pirates increased, they began to have the idea of establishing their own country. Since then, the pirates no longer killed the captives they captured. Instead, they brought them back to the island as slaves. Among them, the males had to do manual labor day after day, while the females were subjected to all kinds of sexual abuse. My brother and I are the descendants of the first batch of slaves. Although we are no longer as miserable as before, there is still danger. Once the passing pirates find out that we are harboring enemies, we might be executed. The hatred between Linton City and the pirates of the Sardinia was well known. The former practiced mercantilism through and through. In order to open up and protect the route, they would do anything. Once they found that someone posed a threat to their interests, they would immediately launch a crazy attack. The latter were ferocious raiders. Like sharks, they hungrily attacked merchant ships in the sea. What was yours was mine, and what was mine was still mine. It could be said that the conflict between the two parties was irreconcilable. Unless one of them was completely destroyed, the conflict would never stop. The pirate king of the Sardinia Islands had once ordered that all the ships belonging to Linton City, regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, whether they surrendered or not, were to be killed. Of course, Linton City's approach was not much different. Moreover, they would often send fleets to attack the periphery of the Sardinia Islands, completely sealing off the sea route for a long-term siege. It was clear that as a noble of Linton City and a member of the Association of Mages, Andre was definitely not safe here. If he was discovered, he would definitely be executed. There was no other possibility. What was even more terrifying was that he did not even have the ability to escape now. Recovering his mage abilities was even more distant. 40 days was not a short time. If he was unlucky, it would be enough for him to die 100 times over. So it's not a blessing in disguise, but a wolf's den right after leaving the tiger's den. Andre muttered to himself with a bitter smile as he stared at the wooden planks on the roof. Fiona was a kind-hearted girl. She could not bear to see the helpless look on the face of the young man in front of her. She comforted him softly. Actually, it's not as serious as you think. After all, Turtle Island is located at the outermost layer of the Sardinia Islands, and there are no specialties to be proud of. The pirates usually only come once in July or August to collect the pearls we collected and give us some money for living expenses. But for safety's sake, you'd better find yourself a cover identity, such as a merchant or something. It'll be easier to fool them if you're really discovered. Cover my identity? That's not a bad idea. Upon hearing the young lady's suggestion, Andre's eyes glinted slightly. He immediately began to think about what kind of identity he could use to deceive the pirates and obtain a relatively high social status. After all, he wasn't interested in being a slave or a laborer who was ordered around by others. First of all, the identity of a hunter would definitely not work because there were no large carnivores on the land of the Sardinia Islands. So, not only would this identity not help him escape, but it would also easily arouse the suspicion of the pirates. Secondly, any profession related to magic would not work. Not to mention that the profession of a mage was currently sealed. Just being able to identify all kinds of raw materials was not something that ordinary people could learn. There was no doubt that it would attract unnecessary suspicion. Just when Andre was at his wit's end, he suddenly remembered that one of his specialties seemed to be beginner forging. That was an ability that he gained after reading a book that introduced forging weapons and defense in the necromancer's private library. It could be used to cover his identity. One had to know that Orier was not ancient China, where the status of craftsman was low and was called a lowly profession. Not to mention those famous blacksmiths who could forge magical equipment. Even the beginner blacksmiths who could forge farming tools, repair weapons, and defense equipment were not inferior to the status of a level 1 professional warrior. They could even talk to the nobles with an equal attitude. Blacksmiths were even more incredible. Even melee professions above level 15 could not help, but occasionally ask for help from them. It could be said that except for spellcasters, these people's status was basically equal to the same profession, and some were even higher. Thinking of this, Andre's lips curled up slightly as he announced playfully, From now on, my profession is a blacksmith. As for my name, I'll call myself Gaunt. You know how to forge? Fiona, who was waiting with her eyes wide open, could no longer hide the surprise in her heart and cried out involuntarily. She did not dare to imagine that a handsome, noble young master would learn how to forge, especially when Andre's body did not have any traces of being blackened by smoke and fire. It did not look like he knew how to forge at all. Chapter 433. In fact, the girl's guess was correct. Andre did not personally do any work related to forging, but with the help of the system, any books and knowledge would automatically be turned into memories and instincts. When the time came, his body would automatically react. Although there might be some deviation due to the problem of proficiency, it was not big in general. That's right, I can forge. Daggers, long swords, scimitars, armor, breastplates, chainmail, inlaid armor, iron gloves, helmets. I can forge anything that you can name, but there might be some small flaws in the quality. Andre did not explain how his forging ability came about, but took the initiative to change the topic, ignoring the sensitive parts. Fiona, who was not scheming, did not notice this at all. Her eyes instantly revealed a look of worship. Wow, 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 you're so amazing. You can actually master so many complex forging skills at such a young age. I bet that even the blacksmiths in Valence City might not know as much as you. No, I can't compare to those old blacksmiths who have been in the industry for many years, but it's no problem to use it to fool the pirates. Right, where are my personal belongings? There should be quite a bit of money in there. If it's convenient, help me buy some corresponding tools, such as a stove, iron felt, iron pliers, iron hammers, steel ingots, etc. When my body is almost fully recovered, I'll forge a few weapons to fool the pirates." After saying that, Andre looked into the girl's eyes with a smile, trying to find a bit of greed or unwillingness in her eyes. As his anger and impulse completely burn away, his caution and rationality once again took the upper hand. Although Fiona did not look like a scheming woman, it was still necessary to test her. After all, there was an old saying, "It's hard to draw a dragon or a tiger, but it's hard to draw the bones." During this period of extreme weakness, he had to make sure that there was no danger around him. Otherwise, if he were to be betrayed, his end would be very miserable, so he had to be careful. "I've hidden all your things. Wait, I'll bring them to you now." Fiona did not notice the probing in his words at all. She excitedly ran to the northeast corner of the room, quickly opened up a piece of floorboard, and took out everything from inside and placed it beside the bed. She held her chin with both hands, as if waiting for Andre to tell her the use of those strange things. "Why? Are you interested in these things?" Andre asked with a smile as he checked his belongings. He did not expect the other party to return almost everything without any hesitation. Even the valuable gems and gold coins were not missing. He could be called a model of morality. In fact, he was already prepared to lose some of his belongings. Even if he lost a few magic items, it would be fine as long as he didn't lose his spellbooks and a few more important items, especially the secondary health amulet, which would definitely play a vital role in restoring his body's recovery speed. Therefore, as soon as he got his hands on it, Andre did not hesitate to activate the level 1 divine healing spell that he would use 3 times a day, Heal Minor Wounds. 3 soft, white lights flashed, and he soon felt that the soreness in his muscles was greatly alleviated. His HP also went from 657ths to 2157ths. Although there was still a long way to go before he could fully recover, at least he could walk. Fiona obviously noticed this and asked with a look of surprise, This is Khan. Magic?" Andre hung the amulet around his neck again, shook his head gently, and explained, "No. To be exact, it should be a divine spell. This amulet contains 3 spells that can heal minor injuries. I just used them to heal my body." Although the prevalence of magic in the South was several times higher than that in the North, it was still not something that ordinary people could come in contact with. Especially in a deserted island that was almost isolated from the rest of the world, there were only a few visitors in a year. It was not surprising that they were surprised to see supernatural powers. Divine spell? Divine spell. Isn't it a kind of magic? There was no doubt that the fact that Fiona could ask such a question showed that she knew nothing about the supernatural power system. Perhaps in her eyes, all powers other than swords and muscles were classified as magic. But there was nothing wrong with this idea, because whether it was divine spells, arcane spells, or natural abilities, they all came from the special energy that was everywhere in the universe. The only difference was that divine spells were arranged by God and given to his priests. Arcane spells were performed by mages, warlocks, and bards through their own learning and understanding in the form of rituals. As for the last one, it was stored in the blood and released when needed. Of course, Andre did not intend to explain more to the girl in front of him. He estimated that even if he explained, the possibility of her understanding was not more than 1%. So he just smiled and directly put the leather bag full of gold coins in her hand. "Well, don't worry about these unimportant questions. Here is my money bag. There should be more than 300 gold coins in it. I will give it to you for safekeeping. Buy all the things that the blacksmith needs as soon as possible. At most in 2 or 3 days, I should be able to recover some of my strength. At that time, I will start to forge weapons to hide my identity." Oh my God, more than 300 gold coins. That's too much. Buying a set of tools and iron ingots for the blacksmith shop will not exceed 150 Alliance gold coins. I can't accept it. Fiona's hands trembled slightly as she held the money bag. She hurriedly returned the gold coins to Andre, looking very excited. It could be seen that she had never come into contact with such a large amount of money, and it was very likely that she had never even seen gold coins. For this poor fisherman's family, perhaps dozens of silver coins could be considered a huge sum of money, but the 300 gold coins in the bag was tantamount to a windfall from the sky. Due to the existence of supernatural forces, to some extent, the gap between the rich and the poor in this world was not much worse than that on Earth in the 21st century, and it was even worse. It was recorded in the ancient books that the wealth of legendary mages was often calculated in the hundreds of millions. Any high-level magic equipment on them was worth millions, not to mention legendary items and artifacts. They cannot be measured by money at all. What about the general price of ore iron? A kilogram of flour was about 4 copper coins. A kilogram of wrought iron was 2 silver coins. A chicken was 2 copper coins. A liter of ordinary ale was 6 copper coins. And a square meter of linen was 2 silver coins. It was almost enough to make 2 sets of clothes. Chapter 434. All in all, the price of food and daily necessities was quite low. Often, the lowest level of magical item would be equivalent to the sum of the wealth of an ordinary person who worked for decades without eating or drinking. It was just like how millions of dollars on Earth were only enough for some people to buy a toy or eat for a few days, but for some people, it was a huge sum of money that they could never touch in their lifetime. However, it was also thanks to these magical items that the financial system of this world, which was rich in gold, silver, and other minerals, did not collapse. This was because after most of the gold and silver mines were mined, more than 70% of them would flow into the hands of spellcasters. The spellcasters would use them to trade with merchants in the same plane in exchange for precious materials, rare creatures, and slaves that they needed. The more powerful ones would directly invade other planes, plunder their resources, or turn them into their own secret bases. The specific operations would depend on the situation. There was no doubt that with Andre's current financial status, he might be a pauper compared to the legendary Tier Lich and the 4 Dukes of Linden City. However, to Fiona, he was definitely a colossus. A mere bag of money that was usually used to buy food and reward servants was enough to make her panic. Looking at the pair of eyes that were mixed with desire and fear, Andre smiled and once again placed the money bag in her hand. At the same time, he raised a hand to stroke the girl's wheat-colored face and said softly, "Relax, it's just a little more than 300 gold coins. Take the extra as part of my gift to you. There will be more when we return to Linden City. You and your brother have saved my life. I hereby promise that I will make you nobles and live a truly luxurious life for the rest of your lives." Repaying kindness was something that any normal person would do, and Andre was of course no exception. Moreover, Fiona's innocence and kindness had won his trust. Although he had not seen Mabel, who had fished him out of the sea, he believed that his brother would not be any worse since his sister was like that. The family environment was the most important place to cast a person's character. If a person grew up among a group of villains, then there was more than a 90% chance that he would choose to walk the path of a professional criminal when he grew up. On the contrary, if a man is brought up in a family of exemplary morals, he is generally said to be a good man when he grows up, so long as there are no major changes. Thus, Andre judged that he should be able to trust this pair of siblings. They had no ill intentions toward him, and at the same time, he was willing to give them enough in return. Although he was not a good person, he was still willing to let good people have good karma, especially this pure and kind girl in front of him. Perhaps because she had never been in close contact with a young man, Fiona's face instantly turned red. She bit her lower lip and nodded shyly. "Thank you." She didn't know why, but she didn't reject the hand caressing her wheat-colored skin at all. Instead, she closed her eyes and quietly lay on the bed, as if waiting for the other party's next move. An ambiguous atmosphere quickly filled the room. As an experienced person, Andre knew very well what the girl's performance meant. A smile appeared in his eyes. He stretched out a finger and gently slid it across her seductive red lips, followed by her slender neck, and finally stopped at the ravine of her chest, admiring the other party's mixed expression of nervousness, excitement, and blush. Just when he was about to measure the scale of the rather majestic twin peaks with his palm, there was a sudden knock on the door, followed by a man's voice. "Fiona, I'm back. Open the door." Hearing this voice, the girl, who was immersed in another world, immediately jolted awake. She quickly touched her slightly hot face and quickly adjusted her breathing. She gently opened the door and pretended to be happy as she asked, "Oh my God, brother, you're back so early today? Let me see what you got." Hee. I was rather lucky today and happened to encounter a school of hunting tuna. I casually swung my spear and caught 3 of them. We won't have to worry about food for the next 2 to 3 days. After he finished speaking, the well-built young man pointed at the 3 large fish he was dragging on the cart behind him. Each of them weighed over 300 kilograms, and one of them wasn't completely dead yet, constantly tossing and turning. Wow, 3 of them. We can keep 1 for ourselves to eat and send the other 2 to Valen City to sell. We can also help Mr. Andre buy some tools for blacksmithing while we're at it. Look, he's already handed over 300 gold coins to me for safekeeping. Fiona said excitedly as she took out a leather pouch full of gold coins like a child and shook it to show off, making a clattering sound. "Andre, that means our guest has woken up." When Mabel received the news, she didn't have time to greet her sister and directly rushed into the room. She looked at the young man lying on the bed in astonishment, an expression of disbelief instantly appearing on her face. Oh my God, how can this be? His body is so weak, yet he only used a short 4 days to wake up. No, you seem to have misunderstood something. My body's constitution isn't as good as you think. The only reason I can sit up now is because of this amulet. If it weren't for the 3 healing spells stored in it, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for me to even move, let alone sit up. Andre took out the secondary health amulet and displayed it as he explained in a half-joking tone. "So it's a magic item. Looks like those strange things are also magic items. You must be a rather powerful noble. Normal people wouldn't be able to get their hands on so many good things." Mabel was obviously much more knowledgeable than her sister and immediately discovered the unusual side of Andre. Even though it was just a guess, she could vaguely feel the dangerous aura emanating from him. That's right. My identity is a bit special, so please call me Gond when there are outsiders. As for my identity, I'm a blacksmith who accidentally encountered a shipwreck." After saying that, Andre stretched out his left hand. The young man took 2 steps forward, stretched out his coarse hand, and shook it firmly. He laughed heartily and patted his chest. "I'm Mabel, Fiona's brother. I'm very happy that you're safe and sound. You must know that not everyone can survive a shipwreck. You undoubtedly have the blessing of the goddess of luck, at least in my opinion." Chapter 435. I'm also glad that you were able to pull me out of the water. Otherwise, there's a high chance that I would have drowned even if I woke up. Oh, right. You often go fishing, so you should be familiar with the surrounding environment. Can you tell me more about the Sardinia? For example, what are the important cities and people worth paying attention to? Andre displayed his conversational skills, knowledge, and elegance to his heart's content. He acted like a courteous noble, especially the amiable smile on his face. He did not show the slightest bit of disgust because of the strong, fishy smell on the youth in front of him. As a mature, transmigrator who was good at disguising himself, as long as he was willing, he could use his rich social experience from his previous life to change his attitude and temperament to make everyone feel friendly towards him. The effect was not inferior to a level 1 arcanist spell, Friendly. In Oraire, the first impression that nobles gave people was that they were dignified, arrogant, cold, selfish, cruel, and greedy, but they were not amiable. Mabel almost couldn't believe that in her lifetime, she would meet a noble who bowed to her and even expressed his gratitude. She immediately rubbed her hands excitedly and said rather shyly, "You're too kind. You're too kind. Helping those who fall into the water is the duty of every fisherman. It's my fortune to have met you. No matter what, you saved me in the end. This is a great kindness, and I have to repay it. Although I can't take out much money now, if you're willing to help me return to Linton City, I'm willing to make an oath here. I guarantee that you and your sister will receive noble titles. And at the same time, I'll give you gold coins that you won't be able to spend in your lifetime." After saying that, Andre took off the seal ring with a serious expression and placed it in the youth's palm. "This is something that represents my identity as a baron. As long as you have a way to send it to the Linton City Sorcerers Association or to Countess Anastasia of the Mariel family, you'll get it immediately." He knew very well that it was almost impossible for the siblings to escape before they recovered their powers as a sorcerer. Ordinary fishing boats were fine in shallow waters, but once they entered the deep sea, they would be quickly smashed to pieces by the huge waves. His only option was to send a message back. Then, with guild leader Boris's powerful strength and the Countess's methods, it wouldn't be a problem for them to sneak him out. Of course, following the principle of equivalent exchange, he would give the person who took the risk to deliver the letter a generous reward. Regardless of whether it was money, status, or land, as long as the person was not greedy to the point of crossing the bottom line, it would not be a problem to feed the person for a lifetime. Looking at the seal ring on her palm that was emitting a golden light, Mabel was momentarily dazed. As the descendant of slaves at the lowest level of the Sardinia's chaotic system, his greatest wish in this life was to escape with his sister and live a normal life. He did not have to worry day and night that pirates would suddenly rush in and commit violence, nor did he have to worry that he would be forced to join a pirate ship one day. One had to know that in this lawless zone, there were no clear laws or systems at all. The few most powerful pirate groups were secretly competing with each other. Whoever had the most power could become the pirate king and rule over tens of thousands of pirate alliances. Mabel would never forget the day 15 years ago when a group of drunken pirates barged into her home and killed her honest father without saying a word. Then, they took turns to rape her mother to death. Fortunately, she had hugged her sister and hid under the bed, barely escaping with her life. As his sister grew up day by day and gradually became more beautiful and enchanting, he was worried every day that she would attract the attention of some pirate leader and cause the tragedy to repeat itself. Thus, he was always looking for a way to escape. Now that there was an opportunity in front of him, he was actually a bit hesitant. On one hand, there was a great risk in doing so. If he was careless and was discovered by the pirates, he would definitely end up in a miserable state. He might even be hung on the walls of Valen City and burned to death. On the other hand, he didn't know much about Andre's background and was a bit unsure if the other had the ability to secretly rescue him and his sister. Seeing the young man's hesitant gaze, Andre immediately understood what was going on. He smiled as he took out the badge of senior member of the Mage Association and waved it around. "I can understand your worries. Please take a look at this. It represents the status of a senior member of the Mage Association in Lincoln City. To be honest, I'm not only a baron, but also the successor personally appointed by the chairman of the Mage Association. As long as you can convey the news, it won't be long before someone comes to rescue us." In order to increase his persuasiveness, he even displayed the spellbook, scroll box, staff, and other items one by one. In particular, the spellbook he'd snatched from the Shadow Wizard was constantly emitting a sinister energy. Even a normal person who didn't know anything would be able to feel the abnormality. You're actually a wizard?" Mabel immediately retracted her hand after touching the spellbook, an expression of disbelief on her face. But it wasn't surprising or ire, whether in stories or in reality. The image of a wizard was either a white-haired old man or a middle-aged man with a cold gaze. A young man like Andre who looked like he hadn't yet reached adulthood was at most an apprentice. "You can say that." Andre shrugged, rather helplessly. "My body has suffered severe injuries, so I won't be able to use the power of a wizard for a long time. So I can't use any arcane spells for the time being." "So that's how it is." Mabel nodded in realization, her eyes quickly becoming resolute. She gripped the seal ring tightly and promised, "Please be at ease. I happen to know a merchant who often comes to Valen City to restock. If you can take out something that can move his heart, such as the magic potions you're carrying, it won't be a problem for him to pass on a message." "Oh, can you tell me more about this merchant? Where is he from? What kind of business does he do? And how did you two meet?" Andre, who had always been cautious, quickly asked a series of questions. After all, he didn't believe that a merchant who could come to a pirate gathering place to restock would be a decent person. If he didn't get the details, he might not even know what was going on when he was sold. His name is Tim, and I heard he's a merchant from Pool City. He basically buys all the goods the pirates steal. We met in a tavern, and later I secretly sold him a small portion of the pearls I collected. We got to know each other after a while. Chapter 436. Without any hesitation, Mabel told him everything about the merchant. He knew that his knowledge was not enough to judge whether the other party was trustworthy or not. Andre narrowed his eyes and thought for a few minutes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as a playful smile appeared on his face. Interesting, I think I know his identity. Without a doubt, this is a devil that would sell everything for profit. More accurately, he's a smuggler. The reason he came to the Sardinia Islands to buy goods is because it's cheap and he doesn't have to pay any taxes. Don't be in a hurry to contact him. Help me buy everything I need to forge. Magic potions can't be used as a bargaining chip in the trade because they will expose my identity. Perhaps creating some outstanding weapons and armor is a good idea. It can hide my identity and arouse his interest. Even though blacksmithing was only a beginner in his specialization, with his understanding of magic formations, it wouldn't be a problem for him to create some exceptional weapons and armor as long as he was in contact with them for a period of time. One of the biggest reasons why there were so few magical weapons and armor in this world was that most blacksmiths were unable to sense magical energy, let alone learn complicated enchantment techniques. It wasn't that their skills weren't up to standard. In the distant era, when the magic civilization was at its most prosperous, even the lowest-ranked soldiers used magical equipment. One could imagine that it wasn't difficult at all, but ever since the great decline of magic, the number of mages had decreased. They were already too busy just researching the various lost techniques. So how could they have the time to work with blacksmiths to create magical weapons and armor? They wouldn't be able to use them anyway. As time passed, the number of such items decreased, but their value increased. Now, every item was enough to make those who needed them go crazy. It just so happened that Andre had obtained many enchantment blueprints from his missions and had already memorized them. Perhaps it would be difficult to enchant small items like rings and amulets without the help of arcane spells, but it would definitely work if he enchanted long swords, helmets, and armor. The only downside was that the enchantment level might be lowered if he didn't cast spells, and he also needed some materials with special attributes. All right, I'll go to Valen City tomorrow morning to buy things for you. Please give me a list. But at this point, a trace of hesitation appeared on Mabel's face. She then gathered her courage and asked, "Are you sure you can forge?" Hearing the young man's question, Andre immediately laughed loudly. "Ha ha, of course. And at most 4 days, you will be able to see how I swing my hammer. As for the list, there's no need for that. I'll go with you tomorrow and take a look at the legendary pirate city, Walloon." "Come with me tomorrow? Are you sure there's nothing wrong with your body?" Mabel looked surprised. "Of course, I can already get up and walk now. Tomorrow, I'll receive 3 more treatments for minor injuries. As long as I don't do any strenuous activities, it shouldn't affect me too much." As he spoke, Andre moved his arms a little. Although he still couldn't exert much strength, eating and drinking wasn't a problem. "Since that's the case, I'm relieved. Please wait a moment. I'll help Fiona deal with the tuna. Otherwise, she may be a little busy. Once you're done, we can have dinner." Andre smiled and nodded. "It's okay. You go ahead. I happen to be a little tired, so I'll lie down and rest for a while." Mabel, who had lived at the bottom of society for a long time, was very simple. She didn't have the hypocrisy of the upper class of Linton City. Since she said she would help her sister clean up the tuna, she did it without saying a word of courtesy. She carried a dagger and walked out of the door. She cut off pieces of bright red fish, sprinkled some salt on them, and put them in a basket prepared in advance. From her skillful movements, it could be seen that her arm and wrist strength were quite good. Coupled with the well-proportioned muscles that had been trained by swimming for a long time, her physical fitness was not inferior to a level 1 professional warrior. 3 big fish that weighed more than 300 kilograms were completely dismembered in less than 20 minutes. The bones of the large remaining fish were chopped and thrown into the pot to cook soup. The basket containing the meat was placed under the eaves to be blown by the sea breeze. As for the internal organs, they were all thrown into the wooden bucket as bait for the next trip. It could be said that the entire fish was fully used, and there was not a single bit of waste on its body. After the busy work, the hard-working and capable Fiona began to prepare dinner. As the elder brother, Mabel, after washing off the fishy smell on her body, sat at the head of the bed and chatted with Andre. She also introduced the situation around the island. As the last trace of the sun disappeared between the sea and the sky, waves of rich fragrance filled the room. Dinner was very simple. It was a simple grilled fish, a chowder soup made of shellfish, crinoline, and bones. The staple food was dried coconut meat. Because the islands around the Sardinia Islands were generally relatively small, they were not cultivated. Furthermore, the pirates were thinking about how to loot merchant ships all day long. How could they have the time to care about farming? Therefore, only a small number of wheat fields were cultivated. The yield was not even enough for them to eat. They basically relied on plundering and smuggling. Things like bread were ridiculously expensive. As the descendants of slaves, the siblings could not afford it all. The coconut meat with a higher sugar content naturally became one of the staple foods. To be honest, the fishy smell of the sweet coconut meat paired with the seafood chowder soup was simply unbearable. Andre did not know how the siblings in front of him had adapted to such a terrible mix-and-match. In any case, he could not accept it. After drinking a bowl of soup and eating a few pieces of fresh fish, he was unwilling to touch the coconut meat, even if he was beaten to death. At the very least, he would definitely not touch anything with a sweet taste before the taste of the seafood in his mouth disappeared. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind that if he still had money after buying the tools tomorrow, he would buy some staple foods like flour no matter what. Mabel was in high spirits today. After eating 2 pieces of tuna that weighed more than half a kilogram, she took small sips of the soup as she introduced the situation of Valen City in a low voice. Valen City is located on Valen Island in the center of the Sardinia Islands. It is said to be named after the first-generation pirate king, Valen Fanning. It is a city built from all kinds of broken ships. There are over 4,000 pirates and 20 to 30,000 ordinary people in all kinds of trades. Among them are blacksmiths, tailors, brewers, prostitutes, merchants who open taverns, inns, and shops, as well as smugglers from various cities in the south. Because there are no law enforcement organizations, there are countless thieves, robbers, and hoodlums. Especially in the dark alleys. You will probably be robbed clean if you accidentally walk in. Like I said before, it's a lawless place. Robberies, murders, and the like can happen every minute. So please don't wander around tomorrow. Otherwise, entering the gang's territory will be very dangerous. Chapter 437. Understood. Don't worry. I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause trouble. It's up to you to decide where to go. Andre made a promise without even thinking about it. In the face of a completely unfamiliar environment, he would not wander around like a brainless idiot. Not to mention that his biggest reliance was the mage profession, which was still sealed. If he was not careful and caused a conflict, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hearing you say so, I'm relieved. In addition, there are more than 40 families on Turtle Island other than my brother and sister. Most of them are descendants of slaves who have been fishing for generations. However, there are a few young people who are eager to join the pirates. If you meet them, you must be careful. If they see a flaw, I'm afraid it will be very troublesome. After saying that, a trace of haze appeared on Mabel's face. One of her hands subconsciously clenched into a fist. There was no need to ask to know that there must be some unknown conflict. Fiona sighed slightly and asked softly, "Brother, you're not talking about Edmund's gang, are you? I really don't understand what they are thinking. They actually worship the murderer of their family. Oof, a bunch of bastards. If it wasn't for Father Rawl stopping me, I would have thrown them all in the sea to feed the fish." When this matter was mentioned, Mabel immediately burned with anger. She gritted her teeth, and under the strong grip, the wooden spoon was instantly broken into 2 pieces. Her eyes were filled with a strong, murderous intent. There was no doubt that she was not just talking about it. She really wanted to kill. However, for Andre, whose hands were already stained with blood, this murderous intent was not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. He smiled slightly and said with a slightly sarcastic tone, "Actually, I don't think this kind of thing is worth being angry about. Humans are originally a race that likes to worship the strong. Although those pirates killed their family, there's an indisputable fact that pirates are stronger. So naturally, there will be a kind of thinking that if I were a pirate, I would be able to do so and so. However, these pitiful fellows didn't understand that the reason why the strong were strong was because they possessed extraordinary strength. For example, outstanding intelligence, outstanding physical qualities, innate bloodline abilities, and charisma that could infect the companions around them. We live in a world full of danger. If we don't have great power, it's better to be an ordinary person. At least we don't have to worry about dying for no reason one day. So be at ease, my friend, that Edmund and his party of whom Fiona speaks are not worth our attention. If things go on as they are, they will all be dead in a year or 2 at most. As the saying goes, the saddest thing about overconfident people is that they always overestimate their own strength. At the same time, they like to provoke enemies who are countless times stronger than themselves. Although I've lost the power of a spellcaster, it's still very easy for me to kill a few ordinary people who aren't even professionals. As the last word fell, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He gently stroked the bronze fire spear at his waist, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Although the gunpowder bag had been completely destroyed after being soaked in the sea for a long time, there were still a lot of lead bullets left. As long as he bought some sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal, in half an hour, these delicate little things could once again be turned into deadly weapons. Ever since Andre obtained the fire spear, he rarely used the crossbow or the bow. After all, drawing the bowstring was a very exhausting thing. Even with the addition of the pulley, with his previous strength, he could only draw the bow about 20 times in a short period of time. After that, his arms would start to feel weak, and his spellcasting would be seriously affected. But the fire spear was different. It only required a certain amount of gunpowder and lead bullets to be stuffed in. The next thing to do was to aim at the target and pull the trigger. The physical requirement was basically 0. It was far more suitable for a mage than a bow. Of course, there were also many disadvantages. First, the shooting range was too short. Second, because it was a musket, it was difficult to aim beyond 20 meters, and it was also more troublesome to reload. However, the lack of quality made up for the lack of quantity. One must know that in order to make up for his weakness of not being good at close combat, Andre made 4 fire spears that he carried with him. The flint was also not an ordinary product, but a high-grade product with a small amount of magnesium metal. There was no way that he would not be able to fire. It could be said that the only thing that he could use to defend himself were these seemingly unremarkable little things. If he used them to deal with ordinary people, he would be able to kill them with 1 shot. Mabel obviously noticed Andre's action of stroking the bronze fire spear. Not to mention, each of the spears was carved with exquisite patterns. At a glance, one could tell that they were expensive. She hesitated for a few seconds and asked tentatively, "Sorry, can I ask what you're holding in your hand? Some kind of magic equipment or weapon?" Andre smiled and nodded. "Yes, it is similar to a crossbow. One is to shoot arrows, and the other is to shoot bullets. But right now, I lack a medium that can produce propelling force, so I can't use it for the time being. Tomorrow, I will buy some and mix it. It will immediately become a sharp weapon to kill people." "Really? It can shoot through people like an arrow?" Fiona's 2 eyes stared at the bronze fire spear, eager to take a closer look. "Of course. When I come back tomorrow, I can show you." Within 15 to 20 meters, the bullets it shoots can even penetrate iron breastplates. Once a human is hit, if they're not treated in time, there is no possibility of survival. Andre, said as he threw one of the spears to the girl in order to satisfy her strong curiosity. Fiona hurriedly took it in her hand and carefully observed the internal structure. After a long time, she still could not figure out the knack. Perhaps the mechanical structure of the bronze fire spear was not complicated, but for a fisherman's daughter who did not even know how to read, it was a hell of a level of difficulty. After fiddling with it for a while, she returned it to Andre. After all, in this world, those who could make things like ballistas, and catapults were all considered high-level technical talents, not to mention high-level goods like firearms. In the following time, the three of them got together and chatted. It was mainly Andre who introduced the situation of Linton City to the siblings, especially after hearing that he had a huge territory. As the elder brother, Mabel's desire to escape from the Sardinia Islands grew stronger and stronger. As for the naive Fiona, she looked at Andre with a look of admiration and spoke with assurance. From time to time, she would exclaim in surprise, and her eyes revealed undisguised love. As a girl who grew up on a remote island, Andre could be said to be the most handsome, most knowledgeable, and most elegant young man she had ever seen. In addition, at the age of 18 or 19, she was most interested in the opposite sex, so it was normal for her to have feelings of love. Chapter 438. Mabel, who was observing her younger sister's every move, had no intention of stopping her. Instead, she was happy to see it happen. He knew that his younger sister might not be able to achieve anything as a noble, but at the very least, she could leave behind a beautiful memory. It was much better than being targeted by the fishy fishers on the island or being targeted by the pirates. As the night deepened, Andre, who was weak, quickly fell asleep. The other two also quickly lay down to rest. As there were only 2 beds in the room and Mabel occupied one of them, Fiona could only squeeze with Andre. Unsure if it was intentional or not, the little girl deliberately pressed her body close to Andre after the lights were turned off. She entered her dream with a satisfied smile on her face. The night on the island was particularly quiet. Accompanied by the sound of the sea breeze and waves, Andre had a strange dream. In the dream, there was a huge eye floating in the air. No matter how he ran or hid, he couldn't escape from that terrifying gaze. In the end, he accidentally fell into a bottomless abyss and kept falling, as if there was no end to the abyss after an unknown period of time. It could be a minute, or it could be an hour or even longer. Suddenly, Andre realized that the eye that had been chasing after him had appeared at the bottom of the abyss. It was like a monster that had opened its bloody mouth and sucked him into the eye. Then, an indescribable amount of knowledge surged into his brain crazily. It was as if his nerves were being squeezed, and the terrifying pain caused him to let out a heart-wrenching scream in just a few seconds. His eyeballs flew out from his eye sockets with a bang, and then exploded, turning into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Just when he thought he had gone blind, the blood that spurted out gradually condensed into a pair of violet eyes, especially the golden light that was faintly discernible in the pupils, making him look like a god. Boom! With a loud bang, the abyss shattered completely. A huge eye stood in front of Andre. It stared at the human in front of it, as if it was communicating silently. But it was a pity that Andre didn't understand what it was trying to say. When he reached out to touch it, a strange voice instantly echoed in his mind. I've woken up from a deep sleep. I need more energy. You are a special individual that I have chosen. You bear a great responsibility. Please integrate the power of the 2 worlds, magic and technology. Uncover the truth of the universe. Become the true master of Arcane. The turmoil of the material plane is coming. The barrier of the gods is weakening. Whether the world will usher in the twilight of the gods or usher in the end of magic, it's all up to you to choose. Crazy demon lord, the treacherous and cunning duke of the devil, a heavenly creature that worshipped order and kindness, an incomparably tyrannical giant dragon, the creator race of the ancient era. All dormant powers will soon awaken, along with the confrontation between good and evil. Chaos and order will clash. When the sun of winter once again soars into the sky, the era of the great prophecy will begin. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire dreamland instantly burst into a dazzling white light, and in the next second, it completely shattered with a bang. Andre opened his eyes abruptly and sat up from the bed, panting heavily. His naked upper body was completely soaked in sweat, and his hands were slightly trembling uncontrollably. That dream just now was too real. It was so real that he could remember every detail clearly, especially the last meaningful words, as if they were giving him some kind of hint. Is this just a dream or something else? Integrating the power of the two worlds? Maybe it's not that simple for me to come to this world. Andre muttered to himself as he steadied his breathing. At the same time, he activated the amulet to heal minor injuries 3 times a day, and soon his HP was restored to normal. Just as he was about to get up, Fiona pushed the door open and walked in with a set of linen clothes. She greeted him with a face full of surprise. "Good morning. You're finally awake. My brother is already loading the ship outside, and will set off in half an hour at most. Your previous set was too conspicuous. Once it was noticed by the pirates, I'm afraid it would be very troublesome, so I specially found a set of old clothes. Quickly change into them." "Thank you, you're so thoughtful." After thanking her, Andre took the linen clothes and quickly put them on. He was very clear that even though he didn't use overly luxurious silk or velvet for his custom-made pirate overcoat, he still used quite a bit of cotton. Perhaps it wouldn't be much in a relatively wealthy linen city, but in the Sardinia Islands where resources were relatively scarce, this set of clothes was enough to attract the attention of many, both in terms of style and material. After changing into a set of gray linen robes and a pair of wooden shoes, Andre completely transformed from a noble with an unconventional demeanor into a rather handsome village youth. If one didn't pay attention to the faint majesty exuding from his eyes, no one would associate him with the potion master of Linton City. In addition, the color of his hair, eyebrows, and pupils had all changed from the original fiery red to a translucent silver white. Apart from a very few close friends and family members, it would be strange if anyone could recognize him. Fiona used a white cloth to tie up her shawl hair and nodded in satisfaction. "Excellent. I'm willing to bet that all the girls in Valen City will be smitten with you." Andre rubbed his somewhat tense scalp and sighed with a wry smile. "Thank you for your praise, but I don't want to charm anyone, nor do I want to attract the attention of others. Give me a cloak. I plan to hide under the hood the entire time and minimize contact as much as possible. Here, this is your cloak. It's not as conspicuous as your clothes, so it shouldn't matter if you wear it." As she spoke, Fiona handed over the anti-detection cloak, silent murmurs. Quickly putting on the cloak and hood, Andre completely disguised himself, leaving only the area below his nose. It was impossible to determine his age and gender, nor his occupation and identity. In the time that followed, he washed his face, used a crushed tree branch to clean his teeth, and had a simple breakfast. After that, he steered the small fishing boat with Mabel and slowly sailed towards the center of the Sardinia Islands. Along the way, they encountered many ships coming in and out. There were smuggling ships that came to do business, as well as pirate ships that went out to rob or return from robberies. Just from a number alone, it was very shocking. It was no wonder that Linton City had been locked in a stalemate for hundreds of years. Even if they suffered heavy losses, they could quickly recover. Chapter 439. It was common knowledge that the interior of the Sardinia archipelago was filled with submerged reefs and torrents. If one wasn't familiar with these waters, there was a 99% chance that they would hit the reefs and capsize. Thus, Mabel was very careful as she stood at the bow of the ship and poked at the surface of the sea with her oars. It took a full 2 hours before they arrived at the legendary city of pirates, Valen. It had to be said that this city was very unique. It was located in a natural deep water area, and a third of it was pieced together from damaged ships. From afar, it looked like a ship was stacked on top of another, extending from the land to the sea. All sorts of ladders, ropes, and planks connected everything together. The remaining two-thirds were built on steep slopes. It was unknown what method the pirates had used to carve out large platforms on top. All sorts of shops, taverns, hotels, brothels, and markets were set up everywhere. There was no planning to speak of. The uneven and disorderly feeling was the first impression that this city had left on Andre. As for his second impression, it was the noisy hawking. The two mixed together to form the strange, chaotic scene in front of him. He finally understood why Lincoln City had never launched an attack on this place. The reason was simple. On one hand, the terrain was too complicated. On the other hand, the platforms on the land were filled with ballistae and catapults. With the advantage of the high ground, the fleets would suffer heavy losses before they could even approach. From a certain perspective, Valen City was an impregnable fortress, at least not until the power of the cannons reached the level of the First World War. Looking at the city in the distance that wasn't quiet for a moment, Andre couldn't help but sigh. It's truly an indescribable place. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a miracle. I simply can't imagine how the pirates built it back then, and how they ensured that it wouldn't collapse in such a chaotic situation. In just a few minutes, he saw at least 3 robberies, 2 murders, and a dozen thieves reaching into other people's pockets. Hee. If you want to survive here, you just need to learn 2 things. The first is to never speak to a drunk pirate. No matter how he provokes you, don't respond. The second is to keep your mouth shut. No matter how beautiful a woman is, don't pay attention to her. Otherwise, you'll soon know what it means to be the most vicious. Not only would they steal money from strangers, but they would also stab you in the throat while they were doing it with you. This city was a paradise for criminals, but it was also hell for strangers, especially the part that extended to the sea. Almost everyone's hands were stained with the blood of innocents. Fortunately, we don't need to stop here. Otherwise, we would have to bring a few more armed companions. After saying that, Mabel ignored the prostitutes who were showing off their full breasts and thighs in front of him and headed straight for the plank road by the shore. When the prostitutes realized that the boat had no intention of stopping, they immediately changed their expressions and started cursing loudly. The content of their curses was filled with all kinds of filthy words, enough to make any normal person blush. However, Mabel didn't mind at all. Instead, she raised her middle finger and smiled at Andre. Did you see that? This is their original attitude. They're a group of vicious wolves that can swallow a man whole. Don't worry. I've seen women more valiant and scheming than this. Andre also laughed loudly in response. Perhaps the prostitutes of Valen City were better in terms of viciousness, but their acting skills were far inferior to the scheming bitches he'd seen in his previous life. Since that's the case, I'm relieved. Let's go to the 1,000 Sails Inn to sell the tuna meat first, then I'll take you on a shopping spree. Perhaps it was because he had hope of leaving, or because he suddenly had a large sum of money on hand, but the young man's spirits were exceptionally high today. He even rowed the boat with all his might. They quickly passed through the crisscrossing waterways and slowly approached a 3-story wooden building with a hubbub of voices. The large signboard at the entrance read, "1,000 Sails Inn, your warm home." Just as the boat filled with fish docked at the simple dock, the inn's door was knocked open with a bang. A drunken pirate around 30 years old drew a parabola in the air and fell into the sea with a plop. Following closely was a bald man over 2 meters tall with bulging muscles all over his body. He shouted loudly, "Remember, keep your eyes open in the future. This is the territory of Iron Fist Garrick. If anyone dares to cause trouble here, I'll make sure to wake them up properly. Damn it, you bastard. How dare you throw me into the sea? I'm the subordinate of Captain Kent of the Sea Wolf. Just you wait. He'll definitely bring people to chop you into mincemeat." The pirate who fell into the water was unwilling to give up. He stared at the 2 ferocious eyes and threatened loudly. The burly man who called himself Iron Fist Garrick sneered as he picked up a fist-sized pebble from the ground and threw it with all his strength, accurately hitting the target's head. Bang! Following a blood-curdling scream, The pirate held onto his bleeding forehead and quickly sank, disappearing from the surface of the sea in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a string of bubbles. Without a doubt, in his situation, he would die within a few minutes once he sank into the water. The chances of him surviving were basically zero. After staring at the surface of the sea for a long time and confirming that the other party had not escaped elsewhere, Garrick curled his lips and mocked with a sinister expression. Idiot! If you were smart, you would have kept your mouth shut and secretly brought people back for revenge. I don't have the habit of leaving behind future troubles for myself, so I'm very sorry, but I can only ask you to die. Andre did not expect that he would be involved in a conflict just as he was about to go ashore. To be precise, it was a blatant murder. The unlucky one who was the most arrogant had already sunk into the sea of corpses, and he did not know where his corpse would eventually emerge from. However, he noticed that the passers-by around him were not panicking at all. The guests in the hotel were also very calm, as if this was just a small matter that was not worth their attention. There were even a few people who were watching the show, clapping their hands and cheering. Abnormal. This city is definitely abnormal. Just as Andre was considering whether to go ashore immediately, Mabel suddenly waved at the burly man and shouted, "Boss Garrick, aren't you afraid that Captain Kent of the Sea Wolf will bring people to cause trouble? His ship is ranked in the top 30 among the pirates, and it's said that he once captured a real large warship." Chapter 440. I was wondering who it was, so it was you. What good stuff did you send today? Hurry up and take some out for me to try. Furthermore, I'm not afraid of the Sea Wolf Captain. He may be a ferocious shark at sea, but once on land, he has to abide by the rules set by all the guilds. Otherwise, a dagger from behind will take his little life. Not to mention, that guy is just a small fry. He's only been on the ship for a few days, and he's already swindling people everywhere under the name of Sea Wolf. Even if I don't kill him, with Sea Wolf's ferocious personality, he'll have to deal with him sooner or later. Garrick stroked the thick hair on his chest, a trace of craftiness that didn't match his reckless appearance flashing through his eyes. As one of the leaders of Valen City's underground guilds, he was well aware of who he could offend and who he couldn't. Otherwise, he would have already died in some dark corner like those idiots who overestimated themselves. Perhaps by the time someone found him, his corpse would have already started rotting and eaten by rats beyond recognition. Nothing good, just tuna meat. If you don't mind, you can have a taste. As she spoke, Mabel carried a basket full of fish onto the dock and gestured for him to eat. Garrick didn't hold back at all. He picked up a piece and stuffed it into his mouth, chewing with big mouthfuls, praising as he ate. Not bad. The taste is very fresh, and it won't take more than a day. I'm sure it'll fetch a good price. All right, I'll inform the bartender for you. Someone will be here to buy in a while. Remember, if anyone purposely comes looking for trouble, just mention my name. Finishing his words, he picked up the 50 kilograms of fish and walked into the chaotic inn without looking back. After watching the burly man leave, Andre smiled playfully and asked in a low voice, "Is that basket of fish a protection fee?" "How did you know?" Mabel opened her mouth wide in shock. She hadn't expected a noble to be able to understand the hidden rules of these guilds. In reality, everyone who came to Valen City to do business had to pay a protection fee. The specific situation depended on the value of the goods, and it usually wouldn't exceed 10%. Otherwise, don't even think about striking a deal here. Worse still, you might not even be able to keep your life. I'm not a fool. One of you took the initiative to give it away, while the other took it with a clear conscience. Naturally, it can't be a social interaction. The biggest possibility is that you're paying a protection fee. What's more, that guy called Garrick just shouted that this area is his territory. You can deduce the result with just a little bit of brain. Even though Andre had temporarily lost his ability as a mage, he still retained his intelligent brain and could easily discern what had just happened. Mabel smiled bitterly and nodded. "That's right. We are indeed paying protection fees." It seems that you're very used to the chaotic situation here. You didn't show the slightest bit of surprise from beginning to end. He had originally thought that as a noble, Andre would be flustered or frightened on his first visit to Valen City. After all, even many merchants who had come here to do business for a long time couldn't stand the numerous crimes in the city. Add to that the fact that many of the top 10 wanted criminals of the various cities were hiding in some small alleyway. Ordinary people would probably wet their pants just by hearing their names. Unfortunately, Andre wasn't an ordinary person. Having seen how a necromancer dissected a living person and conducted cruel experiments on them, he had long since trained his nerves of steel. Even if a red dragon were to descend from the sky at this moment and spit out flames hot enough to melt metal and turn Valen City into ruins, he wouldn't be the slightest bit flustered. There was a saying that people were all forced out. After receiving too much stimulation, one's nerves would become numb. If one wanted to experience the feeling of being frightened again, it would have to be at least 10 times more intense than the last time. Looking at the current situation, it would take the strength of a legendary lich to make Andre feel nervous, flustered, and at a loss. Just as the two were talking, a fatty of about the same height as his waist quickly walked out of the Thousand Sails Inn. He flung the fat on his body and ran to the simple dock as if he was flying. He shouted in an extremely deep voice, "Where's the fresh tuna meat? Hurry and take it out for me to see." Seeing the planks under the plank road creak under the weight of the fatty, Andre couldn't help but worry. He felt that the old and damp planks wouldn't be able to withstand such a terrifying weight. If the fatty fell into the sea, who would have the strength to pull him out? "Please take a look. Excellent tuna meat. I brought over 600 kilograms. Mabel obviously recognized this fatty. She directly opened the lids of all the wooden baskets and allowed him to inspect them. It doesn't smell strange. According to the current temperature, it shouldn't have been left for more than a day. The taste of the meat is rich." The fatty tore off a small piece of bright red fish and put it into his mouth to chew while muttering softly to himself. He looked like a gourmet. It took him a full minute to swallow the chewed fish, and an expression of enjoyment appeared on his oily face. "Not bad. I want all of these." According to the calculation of 1 copper per kilogram, 600 kilograms is 50 silver coins. What do you think? One had to know that Orire was not Earth. Tuna had been hunted to become a rare species, and the price was so expensive that ordinary people couldn't afford it. They could only eat it occasionally to satisfy their cravings. Due to the limitations of navigation technology, most fishing boats here could only catch near the sea. The mesh of the fishing net was very large, and it was easy to find a school of fish. 1 or 2 tuna could be caught every once in a while, so the price was very cheap. After all, a beef cow weighing between 800 kilograms and a ton only cost 15 gold coins. In the coastal areas, the price of fish was generally much cheaper than that of livestock and poultry. 1 copper coin per kilogram was only because of the freshness of the meat. "No problem. Just give me 50 silver coins." Mabel agreed without even thinking about it. As a fisherman who often came to sell seafood, he understood that this price was not a loss for him. After paying the taxes of 50 silver coins, he should still have a lot left. It should be enough to buy some daily necessities for his family, such as linen, salt, flour, and so on. After the deal was reached, the fatty quickly took out 50 greasy silver coins from the leather pouch at his waist. He then waved to the waiter behind him, and baskets of fish were carried into the kitchen of the inn. Not long after, an advertisement board for a special tuna meal was hung at the door. Mabel happily counted every single silver coin, looking very happy. Although he still had more than 300 gold coins in his pocket, he felt that they didn't belong to him. They were the rewards he earned through his hard work, so he felt at ease spending them. Chapter 441. After carefully counting the coins 3 times, the young man reluctantly put all the silver coins into a bag and hid them well. He then turned around and said to Andre, "Now it's time to buy things. Follow me closely. No matter what strange things you see, don't stop walking. Lead the way. Let's go directly to the blacksmith shop and ask the master to buy a set of tools that he usually uses." In fact, Andre wasn't too sure what tools were needed to open a blacksmith shop. He only vaguely remembered that there were iron stoves, iron felt, hammers of different sizes, fire tongs, bellows, pincers, and water basins. There were also some small tools that he wasn't too sure about, so it was easier to find a blacksmith to buy them directly. The blacksmith shop is at the top of the city, next to the market. It will take about 10 minutes to walk there. Follow me. After saying that, Mabel stepped forward and climbed up a stone staircase that was covered in moss. His pair of big feet that were not wearing shoes seemed to be unable to feel the weight of his feet. His speed was very fast, and he turned a blind eye to what was happening around him. Andre followed closely behind. After just a few minutes, he was a little out of breath and short of breath. It was clear that although his vitality had reached 15 points, his weakened state still had a very big impact. Just a little bit of intense activity immediately made him feel a little overwhelmed. Fortunately, it was only a 12-minute walk from the simple dock to the blacksmith shop. Otherwise, he was afraid that he really wouldn't be able to hold on. Just when the two of them were less than 30 meters away from the blacksmith shop sign, a little fellow that was less than a meter tall and agile suddenly rushed out from the chaotic crowd of the market. From afar, she looked like a little girl of about 10 years old. However, if one looked closely, they would find that her facial features were slightly different from humans. She was obviously a halfling. As for her age, it was hard to say. She could be in her teens, or she could be in her 20s or 30s. In any case, halflings had a longer lifespan than humans, so they aged very slowly. The lifespan of a halfling could theoretically reach up to 150 years. Generally speaking, they would only begin to age around the age of 40 to 60. Before that, they could almost always maintain the appearance of a Lolita or a Shota. Coupled with their childish personality, it was enough to make the Lullicon otakus or Shota Fujoshi on Earth excited. However, Andre obviously wasn't a Lullicon, and he didn't want to get involved in any troublesome matters. So, he immediately retreated and made way for them. Hee. Thank you. The handsome guy with silver hair and silver eyes. The halfling woman with a cute baby face and long brown hair that fluttered in the wind curled up the corner of her mouth, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth. She spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Just as she stepped past Andre, a few armed pirates rushed out of the market and shouted fiercely, "Borsha, you damned thief! How dare you touch our things? No matter where you hide. They were all dead meat today. Stop her. Hurry up and stop her." The short person called Borsha wasn't afraid of the other party's threat at all. Instead, she turned her head and stuck out her tongue as if she was playing a prank. She laughed loudly and retorted, "Ha ha ha, do you think you can catch me with your clumsy looks? Dream on. I'm Borsha, the best thief, pickpocket, and burglary expert in all of Valence City. Goodbye, everyone from the Devil's Ship, and help me pass on my most sincere greetings to your Captain Casamercus." As she spoke, she deliberately shook the leather pouch in her arms. From the clinking sounds, one could tell that it was filled with either gold coins or gems. The leader of the pirates was immediately enraged. He gritted his teeth and cursed, Good, 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 stinking whore. I promise that I'll catch you out of your rat's nest before nightfall. Everyone listen up. In the name of Captain Casamercus of the Devil's Ship, I hereby announce a bounty. Anyone who can capture the thief Portia alive will receive a reward of 1,000 gold coins from us. Oh, gods above, the chance to strike it rich has come. Charge! Catch that halfling! Hooray! For the bounty. As the pirates announced the bounty in front of everyone, the entire market instantly boiled over. The originally indifferent crowd was like a pack of wolves that had suddenly discovered their prey. Their eyes were red as they crazily rushed out, like a flood that was roaring past. Seeing that so many people wanted to capture her and claim the bounty, Portia was clearly shocked. She no longer cared about continuing to talk nonsense and hurriedly turned around and ran toward the chaotic lower half of the city. In the blink of an eye, she had disappeared from sight. Andre smiled and shrugged his shoulders, muttering to himself, "Interesting, this city is really full of vitality. It can totally be called a paradise for criminals and adventurers. I suddenly understand why so many people are willing to settle down here." Let's go. Let's hurry up and finish our shopping and leave. Once the bounty is announced, it won't be long before more than half of the members of the underground guild start searching for the target. When that happens, Valence City will become abnormally dangerous, and we might even get involved. With that, Mabel took the lead and pushed open the door, walking into the clanking blacksmith shop. Unlike the large-scale work of hundreds of people in Linton City, the blacksmith shop in Valence City was small and shabby, and the craftsmanship of the blacksmiths was also very average. Most of the weapons hung on the walls for sale were made of pig iron. Although there were a few items made of steel, they were too few in number and very expensive. As for armor, there was basically only leather and inlaid armor. There were none of the more technically demanding chainmail, breastplate, or plate armor. Of course, this might have something to do with the fact that pirates didn't like to wear overly heavy armor. After all, it was easy to fall into the water if you weren't careful when fighting on the sea. Leather and inlaid armor were fine, but heavy plate and breastplate armor would probably sink to the bottom in an instant, unable to float. Without wasting any time, Mabel immediately stated what she wanted to buy. The old blacksmith, who looked to be in his 50s, didn't say anything else and immediately had his disciple take out a set of spare tools. At the same time, he also gave them a blueprint for a furnace, as well as large amounts of iron ingots and coke, spending a total of 160 gold coins. Actually, the tools only took up a very small portion of the total, with most of the cost being in the iron ingots and coke. Due to the large number of purchases, the old blacksmith even had his disciple deliver the goods to the ship for free. If the two of them wanted to transport so many items to the simple docks, it would take at least 20 to 30 trips. Chapter 442. Andre and Mabel made use of this time to walk around the nearby market. The former bought enough sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal from a few shops, while the latter bought a large bag of flour, linen, salt, and other daily necessities. It had to be said that although this city of pirates was filled with chaos and slaughter, the variety of goods was surprisingly plentiful. It was just that the prices were more than double, and the slave market was especially lively. The pirates escorted the sailors, merchants, and nobles who had captured merchant ships back and auctioned them off in front of everyone. The smugglers didn't hesitate to buy the cheaper goods and ship them to distant countries to be sold. Among all the slaves, the most miserable ones were the women. Before the auction, they had been raped by the pirates no less than 100 times. Every single one of them was naked from head to toe. Their expressions were wooden, and their eyes were lifeless. They were like walking corpses. Even if there were one or two young girls who managed to preserve their chastity, their fates were not any better. The only reason they hadn't been violated was because of their special status. For example, they were nobles. In order to sell them at a higher price, pirate captains would normally forbid their crew from acting rudely. One had to know that there was never a lack of thrill-seeking perverts in this world. Many merchants engaged in smuggling were rather wealthy, but their social status was very low. Because their wealth couldn't see the light of day, they developed many disgusting hobbies. Among them, it was very common to press down on noble young girls and wantonly humiliate them. When they got tired of playing with them, they would sell them to brothels. It could be said that the moment these young girls fell into the hands of the pirates, they were destined to live a miserable life for the rest of their lives. Even the families behind them would choose to ignore them, because their existence was a huge stain on the noble's reputation. News of their deaths would often be announced to the outside world not long after, and the person would cease to exist. Without a doubt, Valence City was a city of sin, a city of chaos, and a city of desire. Most of the people who lived here had many pasts they didn't want to talk about. It could be betrayal, hatred, or a heartbroken love story. Travelers from all corners of the continent blended together with residents of all shapes and sizes, and it was filled with an exotic atmosphere. There were sexy and enchanting dancers from the desert, snake charmers from the western islands, and bow makers from the grassland kingdom. All of these factors combined to form the abnormal prosperity of Pirate City. In addition, The pirates continuously threw gold, silver, jewels, slaves, goods, and ships into the market, further stimulating the economy and causing countless smugglers to treat this place as their own paradise. After completing the purchase mission, the two of them did not stay for too long. They quickly walked down the stairs and returned to the dock. Along the way, they saw many people with fierce eyes and hurried expressions. They even found more than a dozen people fighting in an alley. Just as Mabel had said before, the underground guild hidden behind the chaos of Valence City finally began to move after the news of the bounty of 1,000 gold coins quickly spread. It was like a man-eating monster, constantly devouring fresh life. Even the prostitutes were passing information to each other, and more than half of the residents began to search for the halfling thief called Portia. However, all of this had nothing to do with Andre. After paying a dozen or so silver coins as tax, they quickly drove a small boat filled with various tools, iron ingots, and coke slowly out of the harbor. Even though Valence City didn't collect any taxes from outside merchants, it imposed a heavy tax of around 20% on the local residents. This was especially true for the descendants of slaves like Mabel, who had been repeatedly exploited for a long time. Even the people in charge of collecting taxes would take advantage of the situation. They were basically people who could be bullied by anyone. Watching Valence City gradually disappear into the distance, Andre took off his hood and heaved a sigh of relief. He said with a smile, "Our luck isn't bad. We stayed in a place with such poor security for over 3 hours and didn't run into any trouble. We're practically blessed by the goddess of luck." I completely agree with this point. If it wasn't for you guys, it would have been almost impossible for me to escape from the pursuit of so many people. A clear and melodious female voice came from the wooden barrel filled with charcoal. "Who is it? Who's there?" Mabel immediately raised her oar and asked loudly. If the person inside made any strange movements, she would immediately smash the oar down and smash the other party's head. "Ah. Relax, I don't have any ill intentions. I'm just hitching a ride." As she spoke, a little fellow with a black face popped out from inside and patted away the black ash on her body. From her short stature and bright eyes, one could vaguely tell that she was the thief they'd met not too long ago and was wanted by the pirates, Portia. "Damn it, why are you hiding on our boat?" After recognizing who it was, Mabel put down the oar in her hand and cried out in shock. Portia wiped her black face and smiled faintly, revealing a mouthful of pure white teeth. "Heh, who asked your boat to be the closest and filled with goods? Isn't this the perfect hiding place?" "Of course, as a thief with a conscience, I won't be your boat for free. Here, this is the fare. If you take it, we'll be accomplices. You must not tell anyone about my whereabouts." As soon as she finished speaking, she threw a thumb-sized jade to Mabel. Then, she crouched near the side of the boat and used seawater to wash the ash on her face. Oh, damn it. Such a big jade. No wonder the pirates on the Devil's ship issued a bounty. Oh my god. Have I been cursed by the goddess of misfortune? Mabel was obviously frightened and almost threw the valuable jade on the ground. At the same time, her eyes were full of fear as she looked at the halfling. He could almost imagine how furious Captain Casimir Kiz, who was known as the Devil in human skin, would be at this moment. If the other party knew that he had unintentionally helped the thief in front of him, then there was no doubt that he would be torn to pieces. Don't expect pirates to reason with ordinary people. They relied on robbing for a living and had developed a bad habit. They pursued the idea that if they could rob, they would never steal. If they could steal, they would never act shamelessly. If they could farm shamelessly, they would never pay. If someone dared to touch their property, they would definitely end up in a miserable state. Anyone who was involved in this matter would definitely be implicated. The most likely outcome was being hacked to death. Chapter 443. Don't mind it. As long as you don't say anything, I don't say anything, and that handsome guy over there doesn't say anything. Who will know? As a big guy, you're a little too timid. Bosha wiped the seawater off her face and stared at Mabel with her big bright eyes, speaking in a bewitching tone. It could be seen that there wasn't the slightest bit of fear in her heart. On the contrary, she seemed to be eager to try, as if being chased by half the city was a very exciting and fun thing to do. To some extent, a halfling's lively, active, and adventurous nature was vividly reflected in her. Although she was only a little girl less than a meter tall, she had an unwavering heart. However, Mabel was obviously not as calm as Bosha. She stared at the emerald in her hand and muttered to herself in a daze, "It's over. It's completely over. Captain Casimirkis will definitely find out the truth. Although I'm not the main culprit, he'll definitely take his anger out on me. Why am I so unlucky? I'm actually involved in this." She didn't know if it was because she was too scared or because she was inexplicably involved in a dangerous situation, but the last few words were almost roared out. It couldn't be helped. For an honest fisherman, not being scared to the point of wetting his pants was already considered a strong psychological quality. After all, when Mabel was a child, she had personally witnessed the atrocities of the pirates. The strength and cruelty of the pirates were like a shadow that shrouded her heart. It was impossible to say that she didn't have any psychological problems. Bosha curled her lips in disdain. She carefully maintained her balance along the side of the boat and skipped to Andre. She playfully blinked her eyes and asked, "Hey, don't tell me you're scared too? If that's the case, then it's going to be boring. I'm still looking forward to an exciting adventure." "Scared? Hee hee. I haven't fallen to the point of being scared by a mere pirate ship. Tell me, what did you steal that made those people make such a big fuss?" Andre playfully asked as he sized up the little girl standing in front of him. He had read some information about halflings in books, so he knew some of the characteristics of this race, such as being opportunistic and having a strong hobby of collecting. These special races, which were only half the height of humans, often had a strong tendency towards chaos. Most of the time, they didn't steal because they were forced to, but because they didn't want to be bored, even if they had to die for it. Of course, they also had a special ability, which was to sense danger. Once a devastating disaster was about to happen in an area, most of the halflings would sense it and flee like small animals before an earthquake. Many of them had escaped the disaster by following them. However, the migration of the halflings was not always due to disasters. It was more due to the nature of their race. More than 50% of the halflings hated living in the same place. They preferred to wander around, see different sceneries, and meet different people. Generally speaking, most of the time they migrated in the form of a tribe or family, but there were also a few who acted alone. These guys were either thieves waiting for an opportunity to make a fortune and run away, or little rascals whose minds were full of cunning thoughts. Obviously, Portia belonged to the former category. She was a professional thief who made a living by stealing. Although her specific level was still unknown, her skills in stealth, picking locks, pickpocketing, and detecting traps were definitely among the best in the industry. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to steal a bag of jewelry from a heavily guarded pirate ship. She had a head of thick brown hair, but because she hadn't taken care of it for a long time, it was messy and draped over her shoulders. Her black eyes revealed her owner's strong curiosity at the moment. Her skin was very healthy and rosy, and her round face with a little baby fat looked very cute. Coupled with her slender and nimble body, as well as her disproportionately full twin peaks and perky buttocks, she was definitely the type with a child's face and huge breasts. Even Andre had to admit that she was indeed very attractive to the eyes of men, especially when he looked down at the cleavage in the middle of her collar. Even with his strong will, he felt a slight impulse. If it were a Lullican otaku, he might have turned into a wolf in an instant, pouncing on her and swallowing her whole. Portia didn't seem to notice that she was exposed, or perhaps she didn't care at all. She gently opened the bag in her arms, revealing a dazzling light in an instant. Rubies, sapphires, diamonds, topaz, amber, turquoise, malachite, agate. Under the illumination of the sun, they emitted strange colors. There wasn't a single gold coin in the bag, but all of them were expensive gems. "How is it? I've done well this time, right?" Those idiots thought that locking the items in the metal cabinet was foolproof. In the end, I easily pried open the lock and stole everything while they were drunk. If I hadn't accidentally met a cat when I came out, I might still be in the dark. Portia proudly flaunted her spoils of war, completely unaware that Mabel's face had turned green on the other side. One had to know that gems weren't just decorative items in Audiobook, but also important magical materials. Almost all enchantments required the consumption of certain types of gems, so there was no such thing as market saturation. The prices were always high, and many people liked to use gold coins to buy gems, then find a place where no one knew where to hide them in case of an emergency. The bag in front of them contained at least 100 or 200 gems of various types. Even at the lowest price, it would be worth tens of thousands of gold coins. It was probably the savings of all the members of the Devil's Ship over many years. No wonder the other party had issued a bounty. If it had been anyone else, they wouldn't have given up so easily. Without a doubt, such a large sum of money was enough to make anyone go crazy. The reason why the underground guilds of Valen City had mobilized all their members wasn't for a mere 1,000 gold coins. Their true goal was the gems in the bag. No matter who obtained it in the end, they wouldn't return it to the pirates. Drug-eat-dog situations couldn't be more common in the city of pirates. After understanding the situation, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. He reached out his hand and gently stroked Portia's thick hair, praising with a smile, "Beautifully done. You're the best thief I've ever seen, and at the same time, the most daring. Tell me, what are your plans for the future? Do you want to find a place to hide and wait for the news to blow over before escaping the Sardinia Islands? Or do you want to find an opportunity to bribe a returning smuggler and leave directly?" Chapter 444. Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. Portia rubbed her chin and thought for a long time before she finally shrugged with a smile. It was obvious that both her theft and escape had been done on the spur of the moment. She didn't have any plans to speak of. In fact, this was the embodiment of the chaotic nature of halflings. Most of the time, they did as they pleased and did whatever they wanted without considering the consequences or the path of retreat. How about this? You can follow us back to Sea Turtle Island and stay there for a while. There are few people there anyway, so we shouldn't be discovered. We can slowly think about it when the time comes. Also, let's get to know each other. My name is Gond, 14 years old this year, and I'm a blacksmith. Andre bent down and extended his right hand as he spoke, at the same time giving a temporary fake name. Although he couldn't sense any special motives for the time being, he still had a basic sense of vigilance. At the very least, he wouldn't reveal his true identity to a third person before he recovered his strength as a mage. "All right, I was just worrying about where to go to lie low. Nice to meet you. Interesting, handsome human. My name is Portia, 26 years old this year, and I'm a thief." After introducing herself, the halfling with a youthful face and a voluptuous figure stood on her tiptoes and happily shook hands with Andre. 26 years old. Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. "So you're saying that you haven't reached adulthood for long, yet you've already become an experienced thief with outstanding skills?" Due to their longer lifespans, halflings reached adulthood slightly later than humans, around 20 years old. Although they started learning how to steal, sneak, and pick locks when they were children, to possess such superb skills at the age of 26 could definitely be described as a genius. He'd originally thought that this little fellow in front of him was at least 40 years old. He never would have thought that she had only reached adulthood recently. Portia rubbed her nose with a smile and said proudly, "Haha, I've been a pickpocket on the streets since I was 10 years old. I could break into houses when I was 14, and I could easily see through traps and pick any lock when I was 20. You could say that I'm the king of thieves in Valen City. No one is better than me in terms of technique." This was the first time that Andre had seen someone who was not ashamed of their criminal past, and instead felt proud of it. He found it very interesting, and quickly began to inquire about the other party's past. In the end, the more they talked, the more they got along. They directly ignored Mabel, who was in charge of rowing the boat, and let her sigh helplessly. The young man couldn't figure out what the noble he saved was thinking. Why would he invite an audacious thief who had a bounty on his head? However, as a person who knew her own limitations, Mabel knew that she was far inferior to Andre, who was a noble and a mage, in terms of intelligence and vision. He must have a motive for doing this. That was why she didn't stop him. Instead, she silently thought about how she should deal with the situation if an accident were to happen. In fact, Andre had noticed Mabel's reaction from the start. But in his opinion, compared to the young man's unnecessary worries, it was more important to rope Portia in as soon as possible. This was because he had many plans that required a thief who was adept at stealth to complete. Now that he had one, it would be difficult to find a second one if he didn't put in more effort. Just as the two were chatting and laughing, the boat that was returning from a rewarding journey quickly made its way around the dangerous reefs and rapids. Finally, it slowly sailed into the harbor of Sea Turtle Island around 2 in the afternoon. Perhaps because there were fewer residents here, there was no dock at all. Mabel directly pushed the fishing boat onto the soft beach, and then loaded a portion of the goods onto the trailer parked by the forest. The three of them pushed the trailer towards the wooden house in the distance. Because there were simply too many things, it was impossible to load them all in one go. Therefore, the first batch consisted of the more valuable iron ingots, tools, cloth, and flour. It didn't matter if the rest of the coal was seen by others. After all, there were only a few dozen families on the entire island, and everyone would see each other frequently. Generally speaking, there were very few thieves. Moreover, for ordinary people, coal wasn't necessarily better than firewood, so it shouldn't be lost on the boat. Pushing the trailer full of goods through a bumpy forest path, the three of them quickly saw a shabby wooden house standing beside a huge rock. A large amount of fresh red fish hung on the wooden shelves around it, along with some dried scallops and seaweed. On the left side of the wooden house was a simple wooden shed, where dried firewood and sundries were piled up. Without a doubt, this was the home of Mabel and her sister. Although it looked very inconspicuous, it was enough to shelter them from the wind and rain. Moreover, Sea Turtle Island itself was sparsely populated, making it a suitable place to hide. Due to the changeable weather in summer and occasional storms, most of the residents on the island built their houses behind huge rocks or cliffs to prevent their houses from falling apart when the wind was strong. At the same time, the rocks could shelter them from the scorching summer sun. It was simply killing two birds with one stone. This is where they live. It looks pretty good. I thought it would be a simple cave. Portia's eyes shone as she muttered softly to herself. Cave. The corner of Andre's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard this word. What kind of strange thoughts are in your head? You actually thought that we would live in a cave? Along the way, he had fully understood how abnormal this big-breasted lowly's way of thinking was. Not only was there a problem with her outlook on life and values, but she was also muddle-headed in many aspects of common sense. She would often come up with some whimsical ideas, such as whether or not cutting a few holes in the side of the boat could reduce air resistance and speed up the boat. Fortunately, Mabel's reaction was fast enough to stop Portia's actions of destroying the boat. Otherwise, the three of them would have met with the stupidest shipwreck in history, and the things on the boat would have sunk to the bottom of the sea. Since then, Andre had reevaluated her danger level. In the end, he found that she was a completely unstable bomb. If he didn't keep a close eye on her, who knew when she would detonate and kill everyone around her? The big-breasted lowly was obviously unaware of this. Just as she was about to rush over to see the seafood drying on the wooden shelf, a fierce quarrel suddenly broke out in the wooden house. Scram! All of you scram! You're not welcome here. Edmund, if you dare to take one step closer to this house, I'll tell my brother and let him teach you a lesson. Chapter 445. Huh, did you hear that? He actually dares to threaten me. Don't think that no one dares to do anything to you just because you have Mabel protecting you. I'll tell you the truth. We have already been recruited by the Sea Wolf, and it won't take long for us to become a powerful pirate. You'd better consider the consequences of rejecting us now, Or else. Hee. Boss, why are you wasting your breath on this woman? Just strip her naked and let her become a real woman. Then we can bask in the glory together. Yes, look at those full breasts and round buttocks. It's simply making people burn with lust. I can't wait to watch a good show. Not knowing if it was due to the lust that had taken over their brains, for a moment, all kinds of obscenities kept coming out from the crack of the door. It was obvious that they were definitely here for Fiona. Mabel, who had always relied on her sister for survival, heard these words and her face instantly changed. Her eyes were filled with anger. She threw down the trailer, grabbed a thick wooden stick, and rushed into the wooden house. Portia followed the halfling's personality of liking a lively scene. Without saying a word, she took out the dagger that she carried with her and followed. She was not to be underestimated just because of her small size. Although she might not be as strong as a human in terms of strength, she was definitely not comparable to an ordinary human in terms of dexterity and body coordination. Especially the killing technique that bandits called backstab. It could often kill a feudal knight with just one blow. Of course, backstab was not a supernatural power. Rather than saying that it was a killing technique, it was better to say that it was a sneak attack technique. Its essence was to silently approach the target from behind, and then use a dagger, a short sword, or other small but powerful weapons at lightning speed to stab the heart, throat, brainstem, spine, eyes, and other vital parts of the target to achieve the effect of instant kill. It was said that a legendary bandit could kill an entire army that was sleeping without being discovered by the enemy, and could also silently sneak into any heavily guarded place. Even the archmages were wary of them. In just a few seconds, the big-breasted lowly had used light, shadows, footsteps, and breathing to make herself inconspicuous. The moment she stepped through the door, she disappeared into thin air, as if she had entered another world. This was the first time Andre had seen such superb stealth skills. Just from this point alone, he could tell that Borch's thief class was definitely not lower than level 8. She might even be higher than level 10. She was definitely a high-level professional. One had to know that Chloe's master, the female thief Liz, wasn't even half as good as the big-breasted lowly, but she was already a level 6 thief. It was just that she spent most of her time and energy on tempering her battle skills. Seeing the two impulsively run into the wooden house, Andre could only sigh helplessly. He pulled out the only weapon he had on him, which was the cold steel dagger, and walked in through the front door. Although he wasn't good at close combat, with his newly enhanced strength and 17 points of dexterity, he had no problem bullying ordinary people who didn't even have a professional level. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, Andre saw Mabel holding a wooden stick and confronting 5 young men in their early 20s. The leader of the group had a triangular face and a protruding mouth. Coupled with his dark skin and clothes, he looked like a gorilla. There was no need to ask to know that he was Edmund. The 4 people around him were also repulsive. They were either extremely ugly or had a wretched appearance. It was just like the old saying that birds of a feather flock together. At this moment, Fiona was holding a wooden basin and hiding in a corner, shivering. She was obviously frightened by the words just now. After all, she was still a girl who hadn't experienced human affairs. She had a natural fear of things like rape. Coupled with the trauma from her childhood, she curled up into a ball and seemed to be sobbing softly. Edmund obviously didn't expect that his evil deeds would be exposed. His eyes revealed a trace of panic, and he subconsciously took a few steps back. However, he quickly calmed down and stared at Mabel, who was glaring fiercely. He clenched his fist and asked in a low voice, "What do you want? Do you want to fight? There are 5 of us." Puffed. Ha ha ha. Upon hearing such a tone, Andre couldn't help but laugh out loud. Following that, he used a disdainful tone and said sarcastically, "Fight? That's interesting. This is the first time I've met an idiot who barged into someone's house, bullied a woman, and then asked her what she wanted. You should know that in some of the cities and villages in the north, just this alone would be enough to hang all of you. Now I'll give you a chance. Kneel down and apologize, and then crawl out like a dog with your buttocks sticking out. Otherwise, maybe you'll have to say goodbye to a certain part of your body." His words infuriated Edmund's gang. One of them, a man with a ponytail, stepped forward and jabbed Andre's chest with his index finger. "You little bastard," he yelled. "Who do you think you are? If you don't want to die, shut your mouth immediately. Kneel down and beg for our forgiveness, or we'll beat you into a pig's head immediately. That's right. Our boss will soon be a crew member of the Seawolf. If you don't hurry and beg for mercy, you'll be in big trouble." Another guy also threatened. However, it was a pity that they didn't know who was standing in front of them. Just the fact that he was the chosen of the fire elemental prince Isoldezer was enough to make countless people unable to sleep at night. The name of the Flaming Duke was enough to stop children from crying. Andre's eyes flashed with a trace of playfulness. The corner of his mouth rose slightly. He suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Borsha, your index finger." Just as he finished speaking, a black shadow suddenly rushed out from the corner. A dazzling cold light streaked across the air. Following that, half of a finger was cut off from the palm and rolled to the ground. Blood gushed out from the cut and splattered everywhere. The next second, "Ah, my finger, my finger." The guy with the pigtail finally reacted. He covered his wound and rolled on the ground. The intense pain almost caused him to have a mental breakdown. He let out a heart-wrenching cry. The one who cut off his finger was none other than the big-breasted lowly, Borsha, who had entered stealth as soon as she entered the door. This little girl had a ruthlessness that didn't match her cute appearance. She didn't hold back at all when she cut off the finger. Just one strike was enough to make everyone look at her in a new light. Sigh, there are more and more idiots nowadays. They can't even understand the language. But it doesn't matter. I believe that after this lesson, you'll understand that there are many people in this world that you can't afford to offend. If you see them, you'd better obediently take a detour. Otherwise, you'll have to pay the price. All right, don't cry so miserably. It's just a finger. It's not like your entire arm was cut off. Hurry up and get up. Stop pretending to be pitiful. Chapter 446. As Andre spoke sarcastically, he kicked the guy on the ground. The coldness on his face made the other four feel a chill down their spines. Especially the aura that was unintentionally released. It was as if he did not take human life seriously. After all, they were just a bunch of bullies who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Usually, they would at most fight and bully the kind and weak ordinary people. Once they faced a real strong person, they would immediately show their true colors. Edmund, who saw that the situation was not good, immediately gave a look to his subordinates and rushed out of the door without saying a word. However, he obviously underestimated the extent of Andre's anger at this moment. Before he could take 2 steps, he suddenly felt a gust of wind behind him and hurriedly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, it was too late. A gleaming dagger accurately pierced his palm and nailed it to the wooden board with a bang. The person who threw the dagger was none other than Andre, who was emitting a dangerous aura from head to toe. As for the other 3 unlucky fellows, they did not manage to escape. They were all knocked to the ground by the furious Mabel. Wooden sticks as thick as an arm fell from the sky like raindrops. In just a few minutes, they were beaten until they cried for their parents. The most serious injuries were their arms that were strangely deformed. It was obvious that they were broken. There was no brother in the world who could remain indifferent when he saw his sister almost being raped, let alone a brother like Mabel who relied on his sister for survival and supported each other through those difficult times. In fact, from the moment he entered the door and saw Fiona hiding in the corner, his rationality was already on the verge of collapse. Now that it finally exploded, he looked like a madman. He only stopped when the wooden sticks as thick as an arm were broken. His eyes were bloodshot as he panted heavily. The 3 unlucky fellows had already fainted. It was estimated that at least a third of the bones in their bodies were broken. One of them was even constantly vomiting dark red blood. His internal organs should have been shattered. It seemed that he would not be able to survive. Due to long-term physical labor and swimming, Mabel's physical fitness was already comparable to a level 1 professional warrior. According to Andre's estimation, her strength was at least around 15 to 17. Coupled with the fact that she attacked with hatred, The damage caused was extremely terrifying. Even if they did not die, they would be permanently disabled. Edmund wasn't much better off. All of his fingers had been cut off by Bordia's dagger, leaving only his bloody palm. It was about time for him to bid farewell to his career as a professional pirate and find a place to live out the rest of his life. The big-breasted Loli seemed to be particularly vicious towards men who raped women. She didn't show any mercy when torturing them. If it wasn't for the fact that she was afraid of dirtying the floor, she would have even used a dagger to cut off their genitals and stuff them into their mouths, forcing them to swallow them alive. After all, Walloon was a city of sin. Growing up there, he had made a name for himself, so how could he not have some tricks up his sleeve? From Borscha's proficient cutting technique and her familiarity with human organs, it was easy to see that she had killed a lot of people. At the very least, she had killed no less than 50 people. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to train herself to be so agile and flexible. Don't kill me. I beg you, don't kill me. Mabel, Fiona, I was wrong. I was really wrong. It was all Edmund's idea. I was just bewitched. Seeing his companions in such miserable states, the guy with the ponytail had a mental breakdown. He couldn't care less about his broken index finger as he knelt on the ground and wept bitterly, afraid that he would follow in their footsteps. He had noticed Mabel's murderous gaze, the cold glint in Borscha's eyes, and of course, the chilling smile on Andre's face. Devil. The three people in front of him were all devils. The pitiful nine-fingered youth finally realized who he had offended. But now that things had come to this, he could only pray that the goddess of luck wouldn't kill him to silence him. Borscha, can you do me a small favor and make this guy shut up? His sobbing made me feel irritated. Andre glanced at the guy with the ponytail in disgust as he asked the big-breasted Loli. In his previous life, he hated hooligans who didn't consider the consequences of their actions and only regretted it when something big happened. They usually thought that they were fearless, but they were scared to the point of wetting their pants when they entered the police station. They were worse than 3-year-old children. No problem. I have a way to make people unable to scream no matter how much pain they're in. Saying this, the halfling bandit dashed in front of a youth who was trying to gain sympathy, raising his leg and kicking him. With a paw sound, this unlucky fellow's jaw was completely shattered. His throat also suffered a heavy blow. He instantly fell to the ground and coughed violently. At the same time, a large amount of blood foam spurted out. Very soon, he could no longer cry or wail. It had to be said that this kick was just right. If he had been a bit lighter, he wouldn't have been able to destroy the youth's jaw and vocal cords. If he had been a bit heavier, he might have died. Only by being neither too light nor too heavy would he have been able to make the youth lose his ability to speak without harming his life. Andre knew that he couldn't have done better without using arcane magic. Thus, he nodded approvingly. Excellent. Where did you learn this from? Teach me when you have time. I'll do the same the next time I meet a bastard who's pretending to be pitiful. This is the halfling's unique skill, the jaw-shattering throat grab. It's unlikely that you'll be able to use it with your height. Most of the halfling bandits in Valence City know a bit, but there aren't many like me who can control the strength to such an extent. Saying this, Portia ignored the victim lying on the ground with a pained expression. She quickly ran to Fiona's side and helped her up, comforting the frightened girl in a soft voice. It could be seen that this huge-breasted Loli didn't have a bad heart. She was just a bit more vicious towards her enemies. After all, there were so many dark forces in Valence City. If she didn't appear a bit more vicious, she wouldn't have been able to survive until now. Perhaps it was just like what a scholar once said. In this world full of schemes and traps, if a good person wanted to live longer, they had to appear more vicious than the bad. Blindly giving in and compromising would only make the other party take a mile after taking an inch. It wouldn't be long before one would become a lifeless corpse. As a transmigrator, Andre had always looked at the social class and conflicts in Orire from a detached perspective. He knew very well how vicious and merciless the ruling nobles were. At the same time, he had also seen the evil deeds of the gangs in the back streets of Linton City. In front of them, the so-called good forces were too weak. Even with the support of countless gods and churches of the good camp, they could only maintain a weak balance. Chapter 447. As a thief who had always been a partner in crime, Portia was naturally not as naive as she appeared to be. Perhaps there were many tear-jerking stories hidden behind her back, such as a tragic childhood or a situation where she had been violated over a long period of time. One should never underestimate the dark side of human nature, especially in a place like Pirate City where there were no morals or laws. Even the nobles who had always boasted of their elegant demeanor had scum who liked to ravage underage girls, not to mention pirates, smugglers, and gangsters. However, Andre did not like to pry into the privacy of others. It was fine as long as he knew that the big-breasted lowly had her own bottom line and was not a scoundrel blinded by greed. Thinking of this, he turned around and glanced at Mabel, who was slightly absent-minded after venting her anger. He took 2 steps forward and asked in a low voice, "How is it? Have you thought of how to deal with these bastards who wanted to rape your sister? If not, I have a few suggestions. I killed someone, and my mind is in a mess. I don't know what to do." After a long silence, the young man, whose hands were stained with blood, answered bitterly. In fact, he did not know what had happened just now. His entire being seemed to have fallen into an extremely terrifying state. It was as if all his anger had surged into his brain, and his body uncontrollably wanted to destroy everything in front of him. Andre patted him on the shoulder and comforted him softly. "Relax, my friend. You're too nervous. To put it more accurately, you haven't actually killed anyone. Aren't the 3 idiots on the ground still breathing? Besides, what can you do even if you killed them? After all, these bastards wanted to rape Fiona just now. If I were her brother, I would have thrown them all into the sea to feed the sharks. Remember, kindness is a good thing, but there must be a yardstick in the bottom of your heart. Once someone crosses this line, you must fight back. Otherwise, you'll only be seen as weak. Look at that ugly bastard called Edmund. He only dared to appear here today because he was aiming for this weakness of yours. If he showed any signs of doing something similar, you should have taught him a lesson. I guarantee that this scene would not have happened." Mabel was obviously unable to accept her actions. She shook her head in annoyance. "I understand what you're saying, but I didn't kill anyone on purpose. I lost my mind and acted like a wild beast. When I was very young, I discovered that I had this condition. As long as I received external stimulation, I would become impulsive and bloodthirsty. So, I have been suppressing it. Even if I suffer a little loss, I am unwilling to fight with others." "Oh, you said that when you're emotional, you have a bloodthirsty impulse?" Andre's interest was instantly piqued. He stared at the young man's bloodshot eyes that had not completely faded away. Soon, he discovered that not only the young man's eyes, but even his body had undergone a certain degree of change, especially his muscles and skin, which had become abnormally rosy due to the large amount of blood congestion, and his heart was beating more vigorously than usual. It was as if his body had been strengthened to a certain extent. That's right. It's an extremely terrifying and crazy thought. At its most serious, even the people close to it might be harmed. "Tell me, am I under some kind of curse?" Mabel asked with a sullen face. For this symptom, he had asked many people. However, he still could not get a correct answer. After all, as the descendant of slaves, the people with the highest status that he could come into contact with were only smugglers. He did not have any knowledge about the abnormalities in his mind and body. It would be a problem if he could give an answer. After narrowing his eyes and carefully observing the young man's heart rate for a few minutes, Andre suddenly laughed out loud. "Ha ha ha ha! Curse! No, this is a blessing. Congratulations, my friend. If I'm not wrong, you should have some kind of barbarian bloodline. For example, barbarian, orc, half-giant, and so on. Those bloodthirsty and murderous impulses are completely a kind of innate talent. It is called berserk by the people. It can greatly increase a person's strength, physique, and explosive power in a short period of time. In short, you should be a natural warrior. You should be able to unleash your full potential in a dangerous battle. Just suppressing it is useless. Bloodline? Innate talent. Mabel lowered her head and stared at her blood-stained hands in shock. A trace of understanding quickly appeared on her face. The problem that had troubled him for more than 10 years was finally solved at this moment. He quickly threw the matter of beating people up to the back of his mind. A happy smile appeared on his face. All right, don't be too happy yet. How should we deal with these crippled people? Have you thought about it? I personally suggest that we tie a rock to their bodies and throw them into the sea. They have already seen Portia. If the news is leaked, it will easily lead to trouble. The best way is to silence them. Andre gave a very ruthless suggestion without blushing or skipping a beat. He had temporarily lost the power of a mage. Hence, he was merciless in dealing with his enemies. On one hand, it was to ensure his own safety to the greatest extent. On the other hand, it was to avoid trouble. One must know that although these bastards weren't good people, they were still residents of the island and had a complete family behind them. If their parents and relatives were to see this scene, they would definitely hate them. At that time, if they were to secretly inform the pirates, the consequences would definitely be very serious. It would be better to just not see them alive and not see their corpses. Mabel glanced at Edmund, who had fainted from the pain. She gritted her teeth and nodded. All right, I'll listen to you. Throw all these bastards into the sea to feed the fishes. There was a saying that the most frightening thing was when honest people were angry. This was because while others were recklessly pouring out their anger, they were constantly accumulating, and accumulating. Once they reached a critical point, they would instantly explode with unbelievable power. Many seemingly honest people who didn't even dare to quarrel with others would often become strangers to even the people closest to them after losing their rationality. Some of them with extreme personalities would even kill to vent their anger. Clearly, Mabel was a living example of this. Although it was his first time beating someone half to death, he quickly got used to the fact that his hands were stained with the blood of his own kind. While no one noticed, he quickly knocked out the 5 unlucky bastards and carried them onto the trailer. He then tied a rock to each of them and threw them directly off the cliff on the west side of the island. They sank hundreds of meters into the sea. There was no hesitation or fear during the entire process. He didn't show any mercy just because he knew his opponents. It was as if he had seen through the nature of the world where the strong preyed on the weak and was determined to become a true powerhouse. Chapter 448. After everyone was busy cleaning up the blood and traces of fighting in the house, they returned to the boat that was docked on the beach and transported all the goods back. On the way, they met a few residents who had just returned from fishing and even greeted them as if nothing had happened. If he had not heard from Fiona that Mabel rarely participated in fights before this, Andre would not have believed that this was the first time the young man in front of him had killed someone, especially when he was still uneasy more than half an hour ago. However, ever since he found out the reason for his bloodthirsty impulse, it was as if he had completely changed into a different person. It was as if he had completed some kind of transformation in an instant, and his personality had matured a lot. He did not know if it was because Edmund and the others often went out to fool around. In short, their disappearance did not cause any impact, and the remote island once again returned to its tranquility. In the next 3 days, Andre instructed the siblings and the big-breasted lowly to quickly build a furnace for blacksmithing on the hillside 2 kilometers away from the wooden house, according to the design on the blueprint. At the same time, they also built a wooden house that could shelter them from the wind and rain and piled all the things they bought inside. Anyway, there might not be any other specialties on Turtle Island, but there were plenty of lush trees. Cutting down a dozen of them would be enough. As for the roof, it was made of a large amount of dried kelp and a small amount of wood. Basically, there would be no problems as long as there was no typhoon. In order to ensure the quality of the project, Mabel did not go out to fish for the past few days. She was wholeheartedly helping Andre to build the blacksmith shop. Because of this incident, he finally made up his mind to leave the Sardinia Islands with his sister as soon as possible. Otherwise, with Fiona's beauty, she would attract more trouble sooner or later. 3 full days of busy time passed by in a flash. After all the preparations were done, Andre, who had recovered a part of his strength, could not wait to start the fire and began to forge for the first time. In order to confirm his true level, he deliberately smelted the pig iron ingots he bought back repeatedly to remove the impurities inside as much as possible. Then, he mixed in a certain proportion of charcoal to transform it into a more durable steel. After consuming 200 kilograms of pig iron, he barely managed to obtain 160 kilograms of steel billets. Perhaps it was because of the outdated craftsmanship. The loss rate was shockingly high. No wonder the price difference between iron products and steel products on the market was more than double. Not to mention the fact that blacksmiths who knew how to make steel cherished it. Just the loss, as well as the large amount of time and materials wasted, was considerable. One had to know that this 160 kilograms of steel billet had taken 2 whole days. In addition, Mabel's physical fitness was excellent, and she had to continuously operate the bellows. Otherwise, with the current conditions, the most she could get was some wrought iron with less impurities. You want steel? Dream on. A faint smile appeared on Andre's face as he looked at the bar-shaped billets that were neatly arranged on the shelf. He casually picked up a steel bar that was about a foot long, half a centimeter thick, and 2 centimeters wide. He turned around and asked the big-breasted lowly who was dozing off in boredom, "Borsha, I'm going to start forging now. Do you have any weapon that you want?" He had long noticed that the weapon used by the halfling was just a steel dagger made with the most basic of methods. The quality of the dagger was quite average. Me? Portia opened her eyes and pointed at herself in surprise. "That's right. It's you. You must know that I'm not an ordinary blacksmith, so don't miss out on such a good opportunity." Andre teased in a half-joking tone. Then I'll have a dagger. I've always wanted one." Halflings more or less had the habit of being greedy for small gains, so Portia excitedly gave her answer after a few seconds of thought. After 2 days of continuous steel-making, she had preliminarily confirmed that this handsome, young human in front of her was indeed an outstanding blacksmith. After all, the quality of the steel billets on the shelf, be it in terms of hardness or toughness, were much better than the products from Valen City's blacksmiths. All right, a dagger it is then. Andre didn't waste any time. He grabbed 3 steel bars that were about the same length, but of different hardness, and threw them into the furnace to heat them up. As a transmigrator from the era of information explosion, he was no stranger to metal smelting and forging. Many of the things that were considered confidential in this world could be easily found on the internet in his previous life. Among them, there were steel-making techniques, forging techniques, metal wire drawing techniques, as well as the crafting techniques for plate armor, scale armor, and chainmail. He even had the techniques for forging weapons firmly memorized in his mind. As long as he was willing, he could even use magic to create a blast furnace and greatly increase the production of steel. Without a doubt, he planned to use the steel clamping method to forge this dagger. That was to use 2 low-carbon steel bars to clamp a high-carbon steel bar in the middle, and then repeatedly forge it until the 3 completely merged into one. The advantage of this method was that it could ensure that the edge of the dagger had a higher hardness and toughness. Just like sandwiches or hamburgers, the 2 sides were made of low hardness but good toughness, and a piece of high hardness steel was sandwiched in the middle. Its edges were completely exposed, and it had better elasticity and toughness than all steel knives. Even if the edge was worn out in battle, it could be used again after being polished. Of course, this was only a prototype, so Andre didn't have high expectations. His forging expertise was still at the elementary level anyway, and it would be fine as long as it was a little better than the ones in Valen City. The high temperature from the burning of the charcoal quickly heated the 3 steel bars red. When he felt that it was about time, he immediately instructed Mabel to use tongs to stack the 3 steel bars together and fix them in place on the anvil. Bare-chested, he swung the hammer repeatedly, his sweat pouring down like rain. Ping, 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 ping. Sounds could be heard continuously. Just like when refining medicine, Andre's brain would automatically go into error correction mode once he entered the domain of his expertise. His hands seemed to be controlled by some unknown power, and no matter how outrageous the mistakes were, they would be corrected to a certain extent. Moreover, he was exceptionally focused today, so the position of each hammer strike was just right. It didn't take long for the 3 steel bars to be glued together. But no matter what, Andre's body was still in a weakened state, and it didn't take long for him to feel that he couldn't take it anymore. He quickly gave a look. Mabel, who had cooperated with him for many days, instantly understood what he meant. She threw the boiling hot blank into the bucket beside her to quench it. With a sizzling sound, the originally cold water quickly boiled, and waves of steam filled the air. When it had completely cooled down, he threw the blank back into the furnace to reheat it. Taking advantage of this time, Andre could also get sufficient rest. When he had rested enough, the blank was almost done heating, and he continued forging and quenching. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.